On a Sunday afternoon in July 2021, a 20-year-old woman was hiding in a closet with a 1-year-old baby on her chest and a bullet hole through her heart, both lungs, and her liver. She stayed on the phone with 911 for 49 minutes while she bled internally, whispering to the dispatcher because the man who shot her was still in the house. That man was her stepfather. He had just murdered her mother in the backyard while her 16-year-old brother held onto his mother's arm. And before any of it started, the family had already found one of his guns and hidden it. He simply had a second one. That is one story out of 10. Every case on this list involves a husband who attacked or killed his wife while their children watched. Some of these children called 911. Some of them were shot at. One of them was told to keep his seatbelt on moments before his father drove an SUV into his mother at full speed. One of them was 4 years old and begged her father to stop. One of them testified in court against the man who raised her, with her mother's blood still burned into her memory. These are their stories. Case number 1. The morning of October 5th, 2022, Kiera Hudson strapped her 3 children into the back of her SUV. Her 9-year-old daughter sat in the front. Her 5-year-old daughter and 6-month-old baby boy were buckled into car seats in the back. It was 8:30 in the morning. She was driving them to school from her mother's house in Northeast Buffalo, New York. A trip she had made many times before. A trip that should have taken a few minutes. Before she left, Kiera did something that no 30-year-old mother should ever have to do. She put on a bulletproof vest. Her mother, Tammy Hudson, watched her do it and asked why. Kiera looked at her and said, "Because, Mum, he's going to kill me." "You don't understand." She was talking about her estranged husband, Adam Benefield. Kiera never made it to the school. She got about 1 block from her mother's house to the intersection of Shawnee Avenue and Richlawn Avenue, and that is where Adam Benefield was waiting for her. Kiera Hudson was 30 years old. She was a mother to 6 children total, but on that morning she had 3 of them in the car. Her youngest, the 6-month-old boy, was her child with Benefield. The 2 older girls were from a previous relationship. Her family described her as someone who would do anything for her kids. Her sister, Montaisha Jeter, later said that Kiera had been trying to get help for a long time. She had been going to police stations. She had been texting her sister, sending videos, documenting everything she could. She was doing all the things people tell domestic violence victims to do. She was asking for help. She was following the system. Adam Benefield was 45 years old at the time. He had a history with violence that stretched back decades. In the year 2000, when he was in his early 20s, Benefield kidnapped 2 women at shotgun point. One of them was his ex-girlfriend. He forced them out of their car and into his while holding the weapon on them. He was arrested and charged, but while he was sitting in the Erie County Correctional Facility waiting for trial, he escaped. He climbed over a 15-foot wall topped with razor wire and got out. That triggered a 19-hour manhunt across the region before he was caught and brought back in. He eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of attempted kidnapping and 1 count of first-degree escape. He was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. He was released on supervised parole in June 2015. 7 years later, he murdered his wife. The people who knew Kiera and Benefield's relationship saw the warning signs clearly. Her sister called it what it was, an abusive relationship. Kiera knew it too. That is why she had moved in with her mother. That is why she was wearing a bulletproof vest to take her kids to school. The week before Kiera's murder tells you everything about how badly the system failed her. On September 28, 2022, 1 week before her death, Adam Benefield attacked Kiera inside their Cheektowaga home. He punched her. He kicked her. He took her phone away from her so she could not call anyone for help. A home surveillance camera recorded 8 minutes of the assault. Kiera later showed that video to police. Cheektowaga police initially responded and were going to charge Benefield with harassment, a low-level offence. But then they saw the video, 8 minutes of a man beating his wife. After reviewing the footage, they upgraded the charges to misdemeanors: 3rd-degree assault, 4th-degree criminal mischief, 2nd-degree menacing, 2nd-degree unlawful imprisonment, 2nd-degree harassment. Multiple charges, all misdemeanors. Benefield was arrested and arraigned on October 4, 2022. That was a Tuesday, 1 day before Kiera was killed. The judge issued an order of protection, but because every single charge was a misdemeanor, under New York State's bail reform laws, the judge was limited in what he could do. Benefield was released on his own recognizance. He walked out of that courtroom a free man. This was a person who had served 15 years for kidnapping women at gunpoint. A person who had escaped from a correctional facility. A person who was caught on camera beating his wife for 8 minutes straight, and the system let him walk out the door. He was free for less than 24 hours. Kiara had told Cheektowaga police during one of her visits that Benefield was not going to let her make it out of the house alive. She said those words to them. According to the wrongful death lawsuit her family later filed, she told officers directly that she feared for her life. She gave them the video. She gave them everything she had. None of it was enough to keep him locked up. In the early morning hours of October 5th, 2022, Adam Benefield sat in his silver pickup truck on Shawnee Avenue. He was parked and waiting. Between approximately 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning, he used his phone to record multiple videos of himself. In those videos, he was complaining about Kiera. He talked about how he was being mistreated. He sat there for an hour, in the dark, recording himself ranting about his wife, on the same street she would need to drive down to take her children to school. His phone was later recovered from inside his abandoned pickup truck. Cellular data confirmed the phone was located on Shawnee Avenue during that time. At approximately 8:30 a.m, Kiara pulled out of her mother's driveway with her 3 children in the car and turned onto the road. She made it to the intersection of Shawnee and Rich Lawn Avenues. That was as far as she got. Benefield rammed his silver pickup truck directly into her SUV. The vehicles collided at the intersection. He got out. He walked to the driver's side of her car. He was carrying a shotgun. He smashed the window on the driver's side door with the barrel of the weapon. Kiera's 9-year-old daughter was sitting in the front passenger seat. She watched the whole thing from less than 2 feet away. Benefield fired 2 shotgun blasts at his wife. One of them struck Kiera Hudson in the head. She was wearing the bulletproof vest, but it did not matter. He did not aim for her body. He shot her in the head. She died right there, in the driver's seat, with all 3 of her children in the car. The 5-year-old and the 6-month-old baby were in car seats directly behind her. A woman who lived near the corner heard a child screaming for help. She ran to the SUV and found the 3 children inside. She asked them if they were okay. The 9-year-old, through her tears, was able to tell the woman, and then police, exactly who had done it. She identified Adam Benefield as the shooter on the spot. She was 9 years old, and she had just watched her stepfather murder her mother, and she still had the clarity to give his name to the first person who came to help. Benefield did not stay. He got back into his pickup truck and fled the scene. Buffalo police officer Hernandez Sotero had been nearby and witnessed the aftermath. He called for an ambulance and began pursuing Benefield. During the chase, Benefield hit a police patrol car. He was driving recklessly through the streets, and according to the officer, he nearly hit children while trying to get away. At one point, he drove onto the Route 33 expressway, going in the wrong direction. Eventually, he ditched the truck. Officers found the abandoned pickup about 20 minutes later. Inside it was the shotgun he used to kill Kiara, and his cell phone containing all those videos he had recorded that morning. Benefield disappeared. A region-wide manhunt was launched. For an entire week, nobody could find him. The whole city was looking for the man who had executed his wife in front of her babies. On October 12, 2022, police received a tip from a member of the public. The US Marshals Task Force set up surveillance based on that information. They spotted Adam Benefield near St. Luke's, riding a pink bicycle down the street. 1 week after murdering the mother of his infant son in front of 3 small children, he was casually riding a bicycle through the city. He was taken into custody without incident. He was arraigned on 1 count of second-degree murder and 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. Benefield's trial began on November 18, 2024, more than 2 years after the murder. It took place in Erie County State Supreme Court. The most devastating testimony came from Kiara's oldest daughter, now 12 years old. She had been 9 on the morning her mother was killed. She took the witness stand and cried as she recounted what happened. She told the jury she was sitting in the front seat when Benefield hit their car with his pickup truck. She described him coming to the window with a long gun, and then she told the court, through her tears, what happened next. Then he shot her in her head. Erie County District Attorney's senior trial counsel Colleen Curtin Gable told the jury that Benefield had been sitting in his truck recording those videos for an hour before the murder. She walked them through the cell phone data, the surveillance footage from a home camera about 4 houses away from the intersection that captured the entire incident, and the physical evidence recovered from the truck. The surveillance video had no audio and was too far away for clear identification of the shooter. But combined with the child's testimony and the recovered evidence, the case was overwhelming. Defense attorney Paul Dell told the jury not to be swayed by emotion and reminded them of the presumption of innocence. It did not work. The jury convicted Adam Benefield on November 21, 2024. The deliberations were brief. He was found guilty of second-degree murder, 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, and aggravated criminal contempt for violating the order of protection that had been issued just 1 day before the killing. Sentencing came on December 20, 2024. It was not a quiet proceeding. Before the judge could even get through the process, Benefield erupted. He began shouting that it was against the law to have a completely white jury. He called it a setup. He yelled at the judge, the prosecutors, and everyone in the courtroom. "So if you want to send me out there, I'll go out there. But you know what the law is and you haven't followed it, and neither has you. And neither has you. Everybody sat here is..." The judge cut him off. "All right." Benefield kept going. "Hear me out, shut up." The judge ordered him removed. "Get him out of here." Even at his own sentencing, for the murder of his wife in front of her children, Adam Benefield could not stop being violent and combative. Kiera's mother, Tammy Hudson, stood up in that courtroom and delivered her victim impact statement directly. She talked about her grandchildren. She talked about her daughter. And she talked about the 6-month-old baby boy who would never know his mother. She will never see her son walk, say his first words, or see him on his first day of school. As a mother, you can't even imagine burying your child. He should never get out of jail. Not ever. The judge sentenced Adam Benefield to 25 years to life in prison. It was the maximum sentence for second-degree murder under New York law. After the conviction, Kiara's family was not done fighting. In October 2024, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Benefield, the town of Cheektowaga, and the Cheektowaga Police Department. The lawsuit accuses police of knowing about Benefield's violent past and his history of abusing Kiara and still failing to keep him behind bars. The family's argument is simple. The system had every piece of information it needed to prevent this murder, and it chose to release him anyway. Kiara's sister Montacia said it the day her sister was killed. She said it was the system that failed their family. Kiara Hudson did everything right. She left. She moved in with her mother. She reported the abuse. She showed police the video. She wore a bulletproof vest to take her kids to school. She told police that her husband was going to kill her. And still, on October 5th, 2022, Adam Benefield was standing on that street corner with a shotgun, less than 24 hours after being released from court. Her 3 children, the 9-year-old who testified, the 5-year-old in the back seat, and the baby who was 6 months old, will carry that mourning for the rest of their lives. The oldest was brave enough to stand up in a courtroom at 12 years old and tell a jury exactly what her stepfather did to her mother. She did what the adults in the system could not do. She made sure he was held accountable. Adam Benefield is currently incarcerated and will not be eligible for parole for 25 years. He was 47 years old at the time of sentencing. He will be in his 70s before he has any chance of seeing the outside again. Kiera's baby boy was 6 months old on the morning his father killed his mother. He will grow up knowing that the person who was supposed to protect his family is the same person who destroyed it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Kiara Hudson's case is far from the only time a woman tried to use the system to save her own life and found out it was not enough. On Halloween morning 2022, just 26 days after Kiara was murdered, a woman named Yahara Gordon was sitting in her bedroom in Montgomery, Illinois, trying to do the exact same thing. She was filing for an order of protection to keep her husband away from her. She never got the chance to finish it. Case number 2. Yahara Gordon was 35 years old and she had a plan. On September 23, 2022, she filed for divorce from her husband, Timothy Gordon, in Kane County, Illinois. She was done. But she did something that a lot of people in her situation do. Something that seems generous on the surface, but turned out to be fatal. She let him stay in the house. The arrangement was simple. Timothy would live in the basement. Yahira would live upstairs on the second floor with her mother, her aunt, and 4 children. They would share the same house at 1300 Oak Ridge Lane in Montgomery, Illinois, but they would live separate lives under one roof while the divorce moved forward. For about 6 weeks, that is how things went. Timothy was downstairs. Yahira and her family were upstairs. 2 separate worlds stacked on top of each other in the same building. On the morning of October 31st, 2022, that arrangement came to an end. Timothy Gordon was 48 years old. He was not a man with a clean past. His criminal record stretched back nearly 3 decades, and it painted a very clear picture of who he was. In 1994, when he was about 20 years old, Timothy Gordon was convicted of armed violence and robbery in Cook County, Illinois. That was his first serious offence on record. 6 years later, in 2000, he was convicted of aggravated battery with a firearm in Champaign County. That means he shot someone or used a gun to cause serious harm to another person. In 2011, he picked up a conviction for aggravated DUI in Cook County. And then in 2017, he was convicted of unlawful possession of a weapon by a felon in the state of Mississippi. That last one is important. Timothy Gordon was a convicted felon who had already been found guilty of armed violence and shooting someone, and in 2017 he was caught with a gun again. He was convicted and sentenced in Mississippi, and on the morning he killed his wife in October 2022, he was still on parole for that Mississippi weapons charge. He had not even finished serving the consequences of his last crime when he committed the worst one of his life. So when Yahira Gordon made the decision to let her husband live in the basement while she filed for divorce, she was living under the same roof as a man with convictions for armed violence, aggravated battery with a firearm, and illegal weapons possession. A man who was actively on parole. A man who, by law, was not supposed to have access to a gun at all. He had one anyway. The 6 weeks between Yahira filing for divorce and the morning she was killed were a countdown that nobody could see ticking. She was upstairs trying to move forward with her life. She had her mother there for support. She had her aunt. She had her children. She was trying to do this the right way, through the courts, through the legal system, step by step. At some point during those weeks, Yahira began the process of getting an order of protection against Timothy. An order of protection would have legally forced him out of the house. It would have expelled him from the basement, from the property, from her life entirely. He would have had no legal right to be anywhere near her or the children. She never got to finish that process. On the morning of October 31st, 2022, Halloween, Timothy Gordon found out that his wife was trying to get that order of protection against him. The details of exactly how he found out have not been made public by prosecutors, but what is known is that he learned about it that morning and he became upset. Upset is the word the prosecutors used. What happened next makes it clear that upset does not come close to describing what was going through his mind. Yahira knew something was coming. She could feel it. How do we know that? Because when Timothy Gordon pushed his way into that upstairs bedroom on Halloween morning, Yahira Gordon was already recording on her cell phone. She had her phone out and she was filming because she feared a confrontation. She knew the kind of man she was married to. She knew what his history looked like. And she knew that whatever was about to happen, she wanted proof of it. It is not clear exactly how much of what followed was captured on that video. Prosecutors have not released the footage publicly and have not said precisely what it shows. But Yahira's decision to hit record tells you everything about the level of fear she was living with every single day in that house. She was preparing evidence for a court hearing she would never get to attend. The bedroom on the second floor of the house at 1300 Oak Ridge Lane was not empty when Timothy Gordon forced his way inside. Yahira was there. Her mother was there. Her aunt was there. And 2 of her 4 children were there. A 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. 5 people were in that room. 3 adult women and 2 small children. It was a bedroom. There was nowhere to go. Timothy pushed his way through the door. He walked across the room to where Yahira was sitting. There was no struggle. There was no argument that lasted minutes or hours. He crossed the room, put a gun near her left temple, and pulled the trigger 1 time. 1 shot. Point blank. Left temple. Yahira Gordon was killed instantly. Her mother watched it happen. Her aunt watched it happen. A 7-year-old child watched it happen. A 2-year-old child was in that room when the gun went off and their mother dropped. All of them were within feet of her when the bullet entered her skull. The entire thing, from the moment he pushed through the door to the moment Yahira was dead, happened fast. He walked in. He walked across the room. He put the gun to her head, and he fired. There was no warning that would have given anyone time to react. There was no chance for Yahira to run. There was no chance for her mother to step in. There was no chance for anyone to do anything at all. Her phone was still recording. After firing the shot that killed his wife, Timothy Gordon left. He did not stay in the house. He did not turn the gun on anyone else in that room. He fled the scene. This is one of the details that stands out in this case. He went into that bedroom with a single purpose. He walked directly to Yahira. He did not threaten her mother. He did not aim the weapon at the children. He walked in, executed his wife, and walked out. The prosecutor at his sentencing would later use a very specific word to describe what Timothy Gordon did that morning. He called it an execution. And when you look at how it happened, the deliberate walk across the room, the placement of the gun against her temple, the single shot, that word fits. Police were called to the house. When they arrived, they found Yahira dead in the bedroom and the 5 witnesses who had seen everything. Timothy Gordon was gone, but he did not get far. Law enforcement picked him up hours later the same day. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. For over a year, the case moved through the Kane County court system. Then, in December 2023, Timothy Gordon entered a guilty plea. He admitted to the first-degree murder of his wife, Yahira Gordon. His sentencing hearing took place on July 12, 2024, in front of Kane County Circuit Court Judge Clint Hull. Under Illinois law, the first-degree murder conviction alone carried a sentence of up to 50 years. But there was an additional factor in play. Because Timothy Gordon used a firearm to carry out the murder, he faced a separate sentencing enhancement. That firearm enhancement could add anywhere from 25 years to natural life in prison, on top of the base sentence. Judge Hull heard the facts of the case. He reviewed Gordon's criminal history, the armed violence from 1994, the aggravated battery with a firearm from 2000, the aggravated DUI from 2011, the illegal weapons possession from 2017. He considered the fact that Gordon was on active parole when he murdered Yahira, and he considered the way the crime was committed, the single shot to the temple, the deliberate walk across the room, the family members and small children who were forced to witness it. Judge Hull sentenced Timothy Gordon to 50 years in prison for first-degree murder, and then he imposed the maximum firearm sentencing enhancement, natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge concluded that Timothy Gordon had executed his wife. That was not the prosecution's word alone. That was the finding of the court. The judge looked at the evidence and determined that what happened in that bedroom was not a crime of passion, not a spontaneous act of violence, not a struggle that went wrong. It was an execution. According to the Kane County State's Attorney's Office, Timothy Gordon is believed to be the first defendant in Kane County history to receive a sentence of natural life in prison based on the firearm sentencing enhancement factor. His case set a legal precedent in that jurisdiction. After the sentence was announced, Kane County Assistant State's Attorney Greg Sams addressed the outcome publicly. His statement focused on what was taken from Yahira and from the people she left behind. He said that Gordon received the life sentence he deserved for doing to Yahira what she did not deserve. He said she did not deserve to die in what he called an utterly contemptible way. He talked about the memories that were robbed from her, the ones she would have made with her children as they grew up. High school, proms, weddings, grandchildren, all of it gone, erased by a single bullet on a Halloween morning. Sams also noted that when you combine the nature of the crime with Gordon's extensive criminal history, it was simple to see why the court agreed that society needed to be protected from him for the rest of his life. Yahira's family travelled thousands of miles to attend the sentencing hearing. Prosecutors noted their presence in the courtroom and the victim impact statements that were read aloud. The prosecutor said that nothing could bring Yahira back, but that their presence and their words were testimony to the beautiful life that had been taken away so senselessly. The details of this case raise a set of questions that keep coming up in domestic violence murders, and they are the same questions that came up in Kiera Hudson's case just 26 days earlier. Timothy Gordon was a convicted felon. He had been convicted of armed violence. He had been convicted of aggravated battery with a firearm. He had been convicted of illegally possessing a weapon as a felon. He was on active parole. By every law on the books, this man should not have had access to a firearm. And yet, on the morning of October 31st, 2022, he walked into his wife's bedroom with a loaded gun and used it to kill her. Yahaira was in the process of trying to get an order of protection. She was doing the legal thing. She was going through the system. She had already filed for divorce 6 weeks earlier. She was taking the steps, but the system moved slowly, and Timothy Gordon did not wait for the paperwork to catch up. She knew something was wrong that morning. She knew it well enough to start recording on her phone. She had the presence of mind to create a record of what was about to happen. She was a woman who understood, at a gut level, that her husband was dangerous, and she was trying to build a case to protect herself. She was gathering evidence for a proceeding that she would never live to see. Yahaira Gordon was 35 years old. She had 4 children. She had a mother and an aunt who were living with her to help keep her safe. She had filed for divorce. She was seeking protection from the court. She was recording on her phone. She did everything she could think of to survive. Timothy Gordon will spend the rest of his life in prison. He will die there. The judge made sure of that. But Yahaira's children, the 2-year-old and the 7-year-old who were in that bedroom, will spend the rest of their lives with a different kind of sentence. They were in the room. They saw their father walk in, cross the floor, put a gun to their mother's head, and fire. That is not something that fades. That is not something therapy fixes completely. That is something they will carry in their bones until the day they die. The case of Timothy Gordon took place on Halloween morning 2022, 26 days after Kiara Hudson was shot in her car in Buffalo. 2 cases, separated by less than a month, both involving women who were trying to leave, both involving systems that were too slow to protect them, both involving children who saw everything. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the next case on this list did not happen in America. It happened in England, in the city of Bradford, where a woman named Kulsuma Akhtar thought she had finally found safety in a place specifically designed to hide her from her husband. She was living in a women's refuge, the Safe House, with a new identity and a locked door between her and the man she had fled from. It was not enough. He found her anyway. Case number 3. Kulsuma Akhtar and Habibur Masoom met and married in Bangladesh. They came to the United Kingdom together in 2022, after Masoom obtained a student visa. He enrolled in a master's program in digital marketing at the University of Bedfordshire. They were a young couple starting a new chapter in a new country. On the surface, it looked like the beginning of something hopeful. It was not. The relationship between Kulsuma and Masoom was, from the people who would later describe it in court, an abusive one, built on jealousy, possessiveness, and control. The prosecutor at trial, Stephen Wood KC, described it as a marriage in which Masoom held a firmly fixed belief that his wife was not his equal. That belief shaped everything that followed. Kulsuma Akhtar was 27 years old when she was murdered. She was a young mother with a baby boy who was 7 months old at the time of her death. She had fled her husband. She had gone to the police. She had been placed in a women's refuge, a safe house, in the city of Bradford, West Yorkshire. She was hidden. She had a locked door and a new address, and the full weight of the social services system standing between her and the man she had left. None of it mattered. He found her. And on April 6, 2024, on a public street in Bradford city centre, in broad daylight, in front of her baby in his pram and dozens of witnesses, Habibur Masoom stabbed Kulsuma Akhtar at least 25 times, kicked her while she lay on the ground, lifted her head and cut her throat. The abuse did not begin on the day she died. It had been building for a long time. In July 2023, Kulsuma went to stay with her brother because of Masoom's controlling behaviour. She was trying to get some distance. Masoom responded by threatening to harm himself with a knife if she did not come back. It worked. She returned to him. Then came November 23, 2023. Masoom became jealous over a message that Kulsuma received from a male colleague. The prosecutor later described the message as completely innocuous. There was nothing romantic or inappropriate about it. It did not matter to Masoom. He grabbed her face, he slapped her, he pulled her hair, and then he said something to her that, looking back, was not a threat made in anger. It was a statement of intent. He told her, "I am going to murder you, and the police will be taking me." The next day, November 24th, Massam walked into their bedroom carrying a knife. He held it to Kulsuma's throat. Her sister-in-law was present and called the police. Masoom was arrested. That arrest was the breaking point for Kulsuma. She made the decision to leave him permanently. In January 2024, Oldham Social Services moved her and her baby to a women's refuge in Bradford. It was a safe house. The entire purpose of the facility was to provide a hidden, secure location for women escaping violent partners. The address was confidential. Kulsuma was supposed to be invisible to Massam. For a short time, she was. Habibur Masoom did not accept that his wife had left him. He did not move on. He did not respect the system that had been put in place to protect her. Instead, he did something that showed a level of planning and patience that made everything that followed even more disturbing. He tracked her. Using her phone location, Massam figured out where the refuge was. He knew the area, he knew the building, he knew where his wife was hiding. He began sending her threatening messages, telling her to come back to him. When she refused, he escalated. He sent messages threatening to kill her family members if she did not return. And then he got creative. Masoom sent Kulsuma fake messages that appeared to come from a local GP practice, a doctor's office. The messages said their baby son had a medical appointment and warned of increasingly serious consequences if she did not attend. He fabricated a medical emergency for their own child to try to lure her out of the safe house. In the days before the attack, CCTV cameras captured Massam in the streets around the Bradford refuge. He was loitering, watching, waiting. The footage showed him moving through the area on multiple occasions, studying the surroundings. He knew where she was, and he was waiting for the right moment. But Kulsuma had been told something that gave her a false sense of safety. Masoom had updated his Facebook page to say he was in Spain. He posted content suggesting he had left the country entirely. It was a lie. He was not in Spain. He was in Bradford, walking the streets around her safe house, and she had no idea. On April 6, 2024, Kulsuma felt safe enough to leave the refuge. She believed her husband was in another country. She went out shopping in Bradford city centre with a friend, pushing her baby boy in his pram. It was just after 3:20 in the afternoon, a Saturday. The streets were busy with people. That is when Massam appeared. CCTV footage captured what happened next. The cameras recorded the entire attack, and the footage was played for the jury at trial. Masoom approached Kulsuma on Westgate in Bradford. He confronted her. He tried to steer her and the pram away from her friend, away from the public, away from witnesses. He wanted her to come with him. He wanted her to leave with him and go back. She refused. When Massam realised that Kulsuma was not going to come with him willingly, he pulled a kitchen knife from his jacket. What followed lasted only minutes, but the violence was so extreme that the judge at sentencing would later call it vicious and merciless. Massam stabbed Kulsuma at least 25 times. Some sources say 26. The knife wounds were concentrated on her neck and body. The post-mortem examination confirmed multiple stab wounds, including deep wounds to the neck, inflicted with a kitchen knife. The injuries were, in the words of the sentencing judge, unsurvivable. That was his exact word, unsurvivable. And the judge added, as was your intention. But the stabbing was not the end of it. After Kulsuma fell to the ground, Massam kicked her. The prosecutor described this as a final insult. Then he lifted her head and deliberately cut her throat. Their baby's pram was beside her during the attack. CCTV footage showed the pram rolling away as the assault unfolded. The baby was 7 months old. He was physically unharmed, but his mother was dying on the pavement next to him. Kulsuma's screams were captured on the CCTV audio. Multiple members of the public rushed to try to help her. Strangers ran toward the scene. They did everything they could, but her injuries were too severe. She was taken to hospital and pronounced dead later that day. After killing his wife on a busy public street in the middle of the afternoon, Habibur Massam stood up and walked away. He did not run. He did not panic. The CCTV footage showed him walking calmly through Bradford city centre in the minutes after the attack. And then the cameras captured something that would become one of the most disturbing details of the entire case. As Massam boarded a bus to leave Bradford, he was caught on CCTV appearing to smile. The prosecutor later referred to him as the smiling killer. He had just stabbed his wife more than 25 times, cut her throat, and left her bleeding on the pavement next to their baby's pram. And he got on a bus and grinned. Stephen Wood, KC, told the jury that Masson was smiling because at that point, he believed he was getting away with it. Masson travelled almost 200 miles south from Bradford to Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. A wanted appeal was issued by West Yorkshire Police. Through their investigation, officers managed to trace him to Aylesbury, where he was arrested. He was charged with murder, assault by beating, making threats to kill, stalking, and possession of a bladed article. Masson's case went to trial at Bradford Crown Court. His defence strategy was built on a single claim. He said he did not remember killing his wife. He told the court that he had taken the knife with him that day, intending to stab himself in front of Colsuma if she refused to listen to him. He said it was supposed to be a display of self-harm, not an attack on her. He claimed he lost control when Colsuma told him that there would be no shortage of people willing to replace him as a father to their son. He broke down crying on the witness stand as he told this version of events. The prosecutor demolished it. Stephen Wood, KC, told the jury that Massum's tears were as fake as his claims of self-harm. He said the only person Habibur Massoum felt sorry for was himself. Wood also pointed out something critical about the claim that Colsuma had somehow provoked the attack. He told the jury that antagonising Massoum was the very last thing Colsuma would ever do, because she knew exactly what he was capable of. She had lived with his violence. She had felt a knife at her throat. She had heard him promise to murder her. She would never have deliberately said something to set him off. She was afraid of him. Before trial, Massoum had pleaded guilty to manslaughter and possession of a bladed knife. He was willing to admit that he killed her. He just did not want to be convicted of murder. He wanted the lesser charge. The prosecution refused to accept the manslaughter plea. They pushed forward with the murder charge and took it to a jury. In June 2025, the jury found Habibur Massoum guilty of murder. He was also convicted of 1 count of assault by beating, 1 count of making threats to kill, and 1 count of stalking. He was found not guilty on a separate count of assault by beating related to an earlier incident. Sentencing took place on July 22, 2025, at Bradford Crown Court. The judge was the Honourable Mr. Justice Cotter. The proceeding was televised across multiple news channels, including Sky News. Justice Cotter did not hold back. He addressed Massoum directly in the courtroom and described in detail what he had done and who he was. He told Massoum, "On the 6th of April 2024, you attacked Colsuma Akhtar on a street in Bradford, stabbing her to death. You spent days stalking her and trying to trick her into coming out of the refuge. She was in that refuge because of your violence and threats." He continued, "Your intention was, if she didn't leave and come with you, you would kill her. After several attempts, you got her to leave. You then had what you were waiting for." The judge said that within 15 minutes of confronting her on the street, Massoum had viciously and mercilessly attacked her. He told Massoum that he then calmly walked off, leaving behind the baby son he had claimed to miss so very much. Justice Cotter summed up what kind of person was standing in front of him. He said Massoum could properly be described as violent, self-centred, jealous, controlling, and coercive, with a firmly held view that his wife was not his equal. He told him, "You stole a precious young life in a brutal and merciless fashion." The sentence was life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 28 years, minus time already spent on remand. Colsuma's family released a statement after the sentencing. They did not use Massoum's name. They refused to say it. They called him the monster. They said Colsuma was a much-loved daughter, sister, aunt, and mother. They said her loss had left a gaping hole in their lives and a deep and painful void that would never be filled. They described her as a loving, caring, and kind soul with a generous nature who touched the lives of everyone she came into contact with. They said they would miss her beautiful smile, which could light up any room she entered. They said they would miss her humour, her kindness, and her love. And then they said the part that cut deepest. The monster who savagely took Colsuma from not only us, but also from her baby son. Her baby boy was 7 months old when his mother was murdered on the street beside his pram. He will grow up without her. He will never remember her voice or her face. Everything he learns about his mother will come from the people she left behind, and everything he learns about his father will come from court records and news footage of a man smiling on a bus after cutting his wife's throat. Marie Walsh, the senior Crown prosecutor for CPS Yorkshire and Humberside, said after the conviction that Habibur Massoum was a violent and dangerous man who subjected his estranged wife to violence and domestic abuse, causing her to flee to a safe house. She said he was unable to accept that the relationship was over, managed to track her down, and stabbed her multiple times. The charity Karma Nirvana, which works with victims of honor-based abuse, responded to the sentencing by noting that Kulsuma had done everything she was supposed to do. She had reported the abuse. She had left. She had gone to a refuge. She had a locked door and confidential address between her and the man who wanted to kill her. The system was in place. The safe house existed. And still, he found her. He tracked her phone. He faked messages. He posted on Facebook that he was in Spain. He loitered outside the building on CCTV. He waited. And then he killed her on a public street at 3:20 in the afternoon, while their baby sat in a pram beside her. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the next case takes the horror in a different direction entirely. In Katy, Texas, a man named Lawrence Reed did not just kill his wife in front of their children. He went on a shooting rampage through the entire house, wounded 2 of her kids, chased her outside, executed her in front of a neighbor, and then kicked her dead body in the head when someone tried to save her life. And prosecutors later said the only reason anyone in that house survived at all was because the family had found one of his guns beforehand and secretly removed it. He simply ran out of bullets. Case number 4. Lawrence Reed and Valerie Junius had a blended family. Between them, there were 6 children living under one roof at 2718 Roaring Oaks Lane in Katy, Texas. Reed and Junius had 2 kids together, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. Junius also had 4 children from a previous relationship, ages 12, 16, 17, and 20. The 20-year-old daughter had a 1-year-old baby of her own, and both of them were staying at the house too. On the night of July 29, 2021, that home held a mother, a grandmother, 6 children, and an infant. It should have been a full house in the best way. Instead, it became a crime scene. The couple had been having marital problems, that much was known, but what happened in the weeks before the shooting suggests that the people closest to Reed could sense that something very bad was coming, even if they could not name it. Before July 29th, Junius and the children took a trip to Chicago. They were gone for a period of time while Reed stayed home alone. During that trip, Reed started texting his wife strange messages. The specifics of what he said have not been made fully public, but prosecutors described them as strange and noted that he mentioned a gun. Whatever was in those texts was alarming enough that when Junius and the kids returned home from Chicago, the family searched the house. They found a .40 caliber handgun, and they made a decision that would end up saving lives. They snuck it out of the house without telling Reed. That missing gun is the reason anyone survived what came next. On the day of the shooting, July 29, 2021, Reed wrote his wife a message in a card. It was a long message about how much he loved her. Then, even though they were both inside the same house, he started texting her. He wanted her to come upstairs to where he was so she could read the card in front of him. He sent multiple texts asking her to come up. Junius was downstairs. She was visiting with some of her children and her 1-year-old grandchild. The 20-year-old daughter and the baby were there. Other children were in the house. Junius texted back repeatedly that she did not want to come upstairs. She declined over and over. Reed's 2 youngest children, the 8-year-old and the 4-year-old, were upstairs with him. At some point, after Junius refused again to come up, Reed did something that prosecutors would later point to as evidence of premeditation. He said goodbye to his 2 young children. He told them goodbye, left them upstairs, and walked down to the first floor to confront his wife. The family did not know that Reed had a second gun. They had found the .40 caliber and removed it. They thought the house was safe. It was not. Reed had another pistol that nobody knew about. He had it in his pocket when he came downstairs. He spoke to his wife and the family briefly, then he pulled the gun out of his pocket and shot his 20-year-old stepdaughter in the chest. The bullet that hit the 20-year-old daughter struck her heart. It went through both of her lungs. It damaged her liver. A single bullet caused catastrophic damage to 4 major organs. By every medical standard, that shot should have killed her. Witnesses at trial would later testify that it was a miracle she survived. Surgeons had to perform emergency procedures to save her life, and during Reed's trial, jurors heard detailed testimony about just how close she came to dying. But she did not die. And what she did in the minutes after being shot is one of the most remarkable parts of this entire case. That first shot sent the house into chaos. Junius ran toward the back door. Several of the children ran out the front door. Reed fired more shots inside the house. At least one of those bullets hit Junius, wounding her, but she kept moving. She made it out the back door and kept running. Reed followed her outside. Junius was wounded and running through the neighborhood. She was trying to hide. She found a neighbor's car and crouched down near it. Her 16-year-old son was with her. The two of them were hiding together beside the vehicle, a mother and her teenage boy, trying to stay alive. Reed found them. He shot the 16-year-old twice. The teen survived. He was holding his mother's arm when Reed fired the final shot, the one that killed Valerie Junius. She was 36 years old. What happened after Junius was dead on the ground is one of the most disturbing sequences in any domestic violence case on record. Neighbours had heard the gunshots. People were coming outside. They were calling 911. They were running toward the sound of the shooting to try and help. One neighbour reached Junius and immediately began performing CPR, trying to bring her back. Reed walked over. He still had the gun. He looked at the neighbour trying to save his wife's life, kicked Valerie Junius in the head while she lay dead on the ground, and told the neighbour that she was already dead. He kicked her body in the head. One of Junius's teenage sons had also come to try to help his mother. He was standing there, watching someone try to do CPR on the woman who raised him. Reed pointed the gun directly at the boy and told him to run away or he would shoot him too. The boy ran. Reed then turned around and went back inside the house. When Harris County Sheriff's Office deputies arrived on the scene, Reed barricaded himself inside. He called out that if anyone came through the door, he would shoot them. While Reed was barricaded inside making threats, the 20-year-old stepdaughter, the one he had shot in the chest, the one whose heart and lungs and liver had been pierced by a bullet, was still in the house. She had been shot first, before anyone else, and she had gone down. But during the chaos of everyone else running and screaming and fleeing, she had gotten back up. She found a closet. She took her 1-year-old baby and she hid inside it. She was bleeding internally from a gunshot wound to the chest that had hit 4 organs. Her mother was already dead outside. Her siblings were scattered, and she was hiding in a closet with an infant, trying not to make a sound, while the man who shot her was somewhere else in the same house, threatening to kill anyone who came near. From inside that closet, she called 911. She stayed on the phone with the dispatcher for 49 minutes. For nearly an hour, she whispered into the phone, told them where she was, told them what had happened, and waited. Officers coordinated with the dispatcher and eventually managed to sneak her and the baby out of the house without Reed noticing. She was rushed to the hospital and went straight into emergency surgery. Prosecutors later told the jury that it was a miracle the young woman survived. The medical testimony at trial detailed exactly what the surgeons had to do to repair the damage from that single bullet. Heart, both lungs, liver. She should have been dead. Instead, she hid in a closet with a baby, called for help, and held on for 49 minutes until someone could reach her. Reed eventually surrendered to SWAT officers after the standoff. He was arrested and charged with murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault of a family member. His trial took place in Harris County. The jury heard everything. The texts before the shooting, the love letter in the card, the goodbye to his young children before he walked downstairs, the shot that nearly killed his stepdaughter, the chase through the neighborhood, the murder of Junius beside the neighbor's car, the kicking of her body, the threat to her son, the barricade, the 49-minute 911 call from the closet. The prosecution's case was led by Assistant District Attorney Kelly Marshall from the Domestic Violence Division, alongside Elizabeth Lieberman from the Homicide Division. Marshall delivered the line that summed up the entire case in a single sentence. He had absolutely murderous intent to kill everyone in that house and would have tried if they hadn't gotten the other gun out of there. He simply ran out of bullets. That is what saved the rest of the family. The .40 caliber handgun that Junius and the children had found and secretly removed from the house before the shooting was the difference between a murder and a massacre. Reed had a second pistol. He used every round in it. When it was empty, he had nothing left. If that first gun had still been in the house, the body count would have been higher. Prosecutors made that point explicitly to the jury. Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg said publicly, This man went on a shooting rampage in his own home, shooting 3 people that he claimed he loved. An abuser can hurt, maim, and kill anyone caught in their path. The jury convicted Lawrence Reed, 56, of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. He was also convicted on 2 counts of aggravated assault of a family member for shooting the 20-year-old stepdaughter and the 16-year-old stepson. He received the maximum sentence of 20 years on each of those charges. All 3 sentences run concurrently. After the conviction, Junius's family spoke publicly. Her children described who their mother was. They said she was the kind of person who would do anything for them at any time, even when she did not have money for herself. She would find a way. She would make something out of nothing for her kids. Her mother, Gloria Junius, now has custody of the grandchildren. She keeps photos of Valerie in the house. The family said they see her every day. Junius's mother had been on the phone with her daughter when the shooting started. She could hear Reed in the background telling Valerie that he was going to kill her and the kids. And then she heard the gunshots. She heard her daughter get shot 7 times through the phone. She heard her daughter die while she listened, unable to do anything, from the other end of a phone call. Lawrence Reed's case is about a lot of things. It is about a man who wrote a love letter and then picked up a gun. It is about a woman who tried to leave and got as far as a neighbour's car before she was caught. It is about a 20-year-old with a bullet through her heart who had the strength to hide in a closet and call 911. It is about a 16-year-old who was holding his mother's arm when his stepfather killed her. It is about a family that found a gun and secretly removed it from the house, and how that single act of quiet bravery is the only reason more people are not dead. Reed was 56 at sentencing. Life in prison in Texas means he will be eligible for parole after 30 years. He will be in his 80s before that day comes, if it comes at all. Valerie Junius was 36. She had 6 children. Her youngest was 4 years old. Her oldest had just become a mother herself. The 1-year-old grandchild who was hidden in that closet for 49 minutes will grow up knowing that the woman who saved her life, her own mother, did it with a bullet hole through her chest. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Lawrence Reed chased his wife through a neighborhood in Texas, a very different kind of violence was unfolding 6,000 miles away in the city of Holon, Israel. There, a man named Elazar Mandparo did not need a gun. He used a glass bottle and a kitchen knife. And his wife Mastwell did not even make it out of the apartment. She got as far as the stairwell before he caught her, while their 14-year-old son tried to physically pull his father off his mother and screamed the words, "Dad, stop." Case number 5. Mastwell Elazar and Elazar Mandparo immigrated to Israel from Ethiopia in 2005. They were a young couple. Mastwell had given birth to their first son when she was just 17 years old. When they arrived in Israel, they were placed in an absorption centre on Kibbutz Ayelet HaShahar in the north of the country. Absorption centres are where new immigrants to Israel go to adjust, learn the language, and build a foundation for their new lives. It did not go well. A Haaretz reporter named Esti Aharonovitz visited the kibbutz almost 2 years after their arrival, while covering a protest over the poor living conditions that Ethiopian immigrants were facing there. Mandparo was one of the protest leaders. Mastwell stood quietly beside him. Even then, in a public setting, the dynamic between them was visible. He spoke, she stood. According to welfare authorities, one instance of violence by Mandparo against Mastwell was documented while they were still living at the absorption centre. The abuse started early. It did not stop. Eventually, the family settled in Holon, a city near Tel Aviv. Both Mastwell and Mandparo found work at a food factory, but according to police, Mandparo drank heavily and gambled, while Mastwell was the one holding the household together. She kept things running, she raised the children, she went to work, and she lived in fear of her husband for years. A social worker who later spoke with Mastwell described the situation clearly. She said what was happening in that home was not a one-time event. It was an escalation in the severity of the violence. Each incident was worse than the last. The pattern was getting tighter and more dangerous, and multiple people in the welfare system could see it. In August 2019, the violence crossed a line that finally brought police into the picture in a serious way. Mandparo assaulted Mastwell, beat her repeatedly with his fists in their bedroom, according to the Jerusalem Post. The 14-year-old son witnessed this attack, He was the one who called the police. Mandparo was arrested. He was charged with assault. And then something happened in court that, in hindsight, might have saved Mastwell's life if it had gone differently. The court initially released Mandparo to house arrest. When this happened, welfare services immediately objected. They filed a formal warning with the court stating that there was a significant risk of repeated violent behaviour. They recommended he be sent to prison, not released back into the community. The welfare workers could see what was coming. They put it in writing. The police agreed with the welfare assessment. They appealed the court's decision to release him to house arrest. The appeal went before Judge Zion Kappa, who reversed the earlier ruling and ordered Mandparo held in prison. Judge Kappa said something in his ruling that, given what happened next, reads like a prophecy. He said he could not take upon himself any possibility of an error in this case, because the consequences could be irreversible. In February 2020, Mandparo was sentenced to 10 months in prison, including time already served while under arrest. 10 months. That was what the system gave Mastwell. 10 months of safety. And Mandparo did not even serve all of it. Under standard practice in Israel, prisoners are commonly released after serving 2/3 of their sentence. On March 11, 2020, Elazar Mandparo walked out of prison. He had served roughly 7 months, and nobody was monitoring him when he got out. There was no electronic ankle bracelet. There was no domestic violence supervision unit tracking his movements. There was no restraining order in place. He was free. While Mandparo was in prison, Mastwell and the children had been moved to a shelter for battered women. It was supposed to be a safe place where she could start over, a place away from him where she and the kids could begin building something new. Mastwell stayed for only a few days. Then she left, voluntarily. She told the authorities that she could not earn a living and support her children while living in the shelter. The practical reality of her situation, feeding 2 kids, paying for things, surviving day to day, made the shelter feel impossible. She went back to their apartment in Holon. When Mandparo was released from prison on March 11th, he initially went to live with his sister, who also lived in Holon. He stayed there for about a week. Then he called Mastwell. Since there was no restraining order against him, there was nothing legally preventing him from contacting her or returning home. He moved back in. A family member later told reporters that nobody thought there would be more violence. They said the couple had made up, they had talked. From the outside, it looked like they were trying again. At the time of Mandparo's release, Mastwell had told welfare services in Holon that she did not feel in danger from her husband. Whether she believed that, or whether she said it because she felt she had no other options, is something only she would have known. But the welfare system took her at her word. And so Mandparo was back in the apartment, back with his wife, back with the 6-year-old and the 14-year-old, and nobody was watching. But the whole time he was back, according to what he later told friends, Mandparo believed Mastwell was cheating on him with one of his close friends. He had convinced himself of this while he was in prison. He talked about it. He told people about his suspicions. He carried this belief around like a loaded weapon for the 2 weeks between moving back in and killing her. April 28, 2020. It was the evening. Israel was deep in the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. The country was under lockdown restrictions. Domestic violence hotlines were reporting that calls had doubled. Families were trapped indoors together, and the Ministry of Labour, Social Affairs and Social Services was publicly warning that the true number of abuse cases was likely far higher than what was being reported. Inside the Mandparo apartment in Holon, with both children home, an argument broke out between Mastwell and Elazar. According to the indictment filed by Tel Aviv prosecutors, the argument started because Mastwell refused to help Mandparo make a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee. That was the trigger. That was what set off the chain of events that ended with Mastwell dead on the floor of the apartment building's stairwell and her 14-year-old son injured and screaming. When Mastwell refused to make the coffee, Mandparo grabbed a glass bottle from the living room and beat her over the head with it. Then he walked to the kitchen. He opened a drawer or a cabinet and took out a knife with a 20-centimetre blade, about 8 inches long. He walked back toward Mastwell with the knife. Mastwell saw the knife. She ran. She made it out of the apartment and into the building's stairwell. She was trying to get away. She was trying to get down the stairs and out of the building and away from the man with the knife. She did not make it. Mandparo chased her into the stairwell. According to the indictment, he stabbed her in the back and in the neck, multiple times, in front of their children. Their 14-year-old son did not freeze. He did not hide. He ran toward his father and tried to stop the attack. He physically tried to pull his father away from his mother. While doing this, he cried out 2 words that the court would later hear repeated during trial proceedings and that would be cited in news coverage around the world. He screamed, "Dad, stop!" Mandparo did not stop. The 14-year-old was injured during the struggle. He sustained a wound to his arm from the knife while trying to save his mother's life. He was 14 years old, and he put his body between a grown man with an 8-inch blade and the woman on the ground, and it was not enough. Mastwell was found unconscious in the stairwell with multiple stab wounds to her upper body. Megan David Adome paramedics arrived and pronounced her dead at the scene. She was 31 years old. After killing Mastwell, Mandparo fled the apartment building. He left his children behind, the 14-year-old with a knife wound and the 6-year-old who had just watched everything. He walked out and disappeared into the streets of Holon. Police arrived at the scene. A responding officer later described what they found. He said they discovered a woman in the stairwell with signs of severe injury to her upper body. MDA declared her dead. Eyewitness reports confirmed it was an attack by her partner. West Yorkshire Police had used CCTV to find Habibur Massoum in the previous case. Israeli police used a more direct approach. They released Mandparo's name and photograph to the public and asked for help. Members of the public recognised him wandering the streets of Holon hours after the murder. They called police immediately. Mandparo was arrested. During his interrogation, he confessed. He told police he had killed Mastwell. He gave 2 different explanations for why. To the police, he indicated that he suspected his wife of having an affair with his friend while he was in prison. To others, the version was that he lost control when she refused to make him coffee. Police did not believe either version represented the full truth. They said the killing was planned. On May 15, 2020, Tel Aviv prosecutors filed an indictment at the city's district court. Elazar Mandparo, 37, was charged with aggravated murder. The case moved through the Israeli court system over the next 2.5 years. On January 4, 2023, Elazar Mandparo stood in the Tel Aviv District Court for sentencing. He was 39 years old by then. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment. He was also ordered to pay 258,000 new Israeli shekels, roughly $73,000, to Mastwell's family. Mastwell's relatives were in the courtroom. They held photographs of her during the proceedings. The images showed a young woman, smiling, alive. The woman those children had known before the stairwell, before the knife, before the glass bottle and the cup of coffee that started it all. Her brother spoke publicly after the sentencing. He said Mastwell was reserved by nature. She was quiet. She did not tell her family about the full extent of what was happening in her home. They knew some of it, but not all of it. The worst parts she kept to herself. The Wizzo Israel chairwoman, Ora Korazim, had commented publicly on the case back when the murder first happened in April 2020. She said Mastwell's killing was the tip of the iceberg of a wave of domestic violence that had washed over the country during the coronavirus crisis. She said that at that very moment, hundreds of thousands of women and children were living with ongoing abuse, aggression and fear, trapped with violent partners without a clear way to get help. And she said the welfare services meant to protect them had been downsized, leaving families abandoned. The statistics bore this out. The Ministry of Labour, Social Affairs and Social Services reported that in the 2 weeks following Mastwell's murder, calls to the National Domestic Violence Hotline ran 4 times higher than they had during the first month of lockdown. Over 400 complaints came in during a 12-day stretch alone, more than 33 every single day. Mastwell Elazar was one of those women the system knew about. She was known to police. She was known to welfare services. She was known to the courts. Judge Zion Kappa had personally ruled that the consequences of releasing Mandparo could be irreversible. The welfare workers had warned in writing that there was a significant risk of repeated violence. Everyone who was supposed to see the danger saw it. They wrote it down. They filed it. They flagged it. And then Mandparo served 7 months, walked out with no monitoring, moved back in with no restraining order, and stabbed his wife to death in a stairwell while their 14-year-old tried to pull him off her and their 6-year-old watched. 5 cases in, and the pattern keeps repeating. Women who reported, women who left. Women who went to shelters, wore body armour, recorded evidence on their phones, fled to other countries. Systems that saw the danger, documented it, and still could not stop it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the next case takes place in Oklahoma City, and what makes it different is not the system's failure. It is a 13-year-old boy. Kendreen Jordan beat and stabbed his wife Geneva Opperman while her children were in the house, and when the case finally went to trial years later, it was her teenage son who took the stand and told the courtroom exactly what he saw his stepfather do to his mother. Case number 6. Geneva Opperman was 26 years old. She was a mother of 6 children. Her youngest baby was just 4 months old. She lived in an apartment in the 4600 block of West Nicholas Avenue in northwest Oklahoma City, near North Meridian and the Northwest Expressway. She was married to a man named Kendreen Jordan, also referred to in later court records as Kendreen Banks. They had been married for 2 years and shared 2 children together, a 1-year-old and the 4-month-old baby. Geneva also had 4 older children from before the marriage. On March 10, 2020, Geneva was found beaten and stabbed to death inside that apartment. 3 of her 6 children were in the home when it happened. They were forced to see and hear things that no child should ever have to witness. The Oklahoma County District Attorney would later describe the murder as the end result of months of domestic abuse. Geneva did not die quietly, and she did not die without someone hearing. The apartment building where Geneva lived had thin walls. The neighbours downstairs could hear what went on above them. On the day of the murder, a man named Rolando Travso, who lived in the unit below Geneva's, heard everything. What Travso described to reporters paints a picture of the final minutes of Geneva Opperman's life. He said chaos was breaking out upstairs. He could hear her voice. She was saying, "Stop, okay, please." She kept saying, "Okay, okay." Traverso said she would run, and then she would scream. There was running. There was screaming. There were the sounds of a woman trying to survive inside her own home, begging the person hurting her to stop. Traverso called the police. Officers responded to the apartment, but when they arrived, they heard nothing. The noise had stopped. There was no sound coming from inside the unit. Without evidence of an active emergency, the officers left. Hours passed. Nobody checked on Geneva. Nobody went inside. It was not until a family member came to the apartment later that day and found her that anyone realized what had happened. Geneva Opperman was dead. She had been beaten. She had been stabbed. Her body was inside the apartment where 3 of her children had been present during the attack. Oklahoma City police arrived and confirmed the death. The official report stated that Geneva had injuries consistent with homicide. An arrest warrant was immediately issued for her husband, 26-year-old Kendreen Jordan. He was already gone. Neighbours told police and reporters that Jordan had been seen at the apartment building on the morning of the day Geneva's body was found. Traverso, the same neighbour who had heard the screaming, said Jordan came to his door that morning and asked to use his phone to make a call. After that, Jordan disappeared. Police launched a search. They released his name and photograph to the public. They asked anyone who recognised him or knew where he was to call Crime Stoppers at 405-235-7300. For several days, Kendreen Jordan was a wanted man. He did not go far in terms of creativity. He went south. He crossed the state line into Texas and ended up in Denton, a city about 200 miles from Oklahoma City. Denton police located him and placed him under arrest. He was charged with first-degree murder. Back in Oklahoma City, Geneva's family was trying to hold itself together. 6 children no longer had a mother. The youngest 2, the 1-year-old and the 4-month-old, were babies who would never form a single memory of the woman who gave them life. The older children, including the 3 who were in the apartment during the killing, would carry what they saw and heard for the rest of their lives. A family member named Sean Hill spoke to reporters in the days after the murder. What Hill said captured something that gets lost in a lot of domestic violence cases: the fact that the damage spreads in every direction. Hill said, "It's terrible on both sides of the family, even Jordan's side of the family, because we both lost. They lost their mother and gonna lose their father because of this. Everyone gonna lose in this." Everyone lost. The children lost both parents in one night. They lost their mother to murder and their father to the prison system. The extended family on both sides was left to pick up the pieces of 6 young lives that had been shattered before most of them were old enough to understand why. Geneva's sister, Fatima Smith, said, "Rest in peace to my sister. I know she may be physically not here, but spiritually, she's always going to be with us." And then the case stalled. Kendrine Jordan, identified in later proceedings under the name Kendrine Banks, was charged with first-degree murder. Oklahoma County prosecutors reviewed the case and made a decision that reflected how seriously they viewed the crime. They announced they would seek the death penalty. That announcement set the stage for what would become a 5-year wait. Death penalty cases move slowly through the court system. The legal process, motions, hearings, psychiatric evaluations, discovery, pre-trial arguments, dragged on year after year. Geneva's family waited. Her children grew up. The babies became toddlers. The toddlers became school-age kids. The school-age kids became teenagers. And still, no trial. For 5 years, Geneva's family lived in a kind of limbo, where the man who killed her was locked up, but had not yet been held formally accountable. There was no conviction. There was no sentencing. There was no moment in a courtroom where a judge looked at Kendrine Jordan and told him what he had done and what it would cost him. Geneva's sister, Cassandra Opperman, described what those 5 years felt like. She said she still had not wrapped her head around it. She said the family thought about it every day. They cried every night. They were broken. Geneva's aunt, Brenda Wright, said it more simply. "We're all broken." Geneva's mother, Leola Scott, said 4 words that carried the weight of everything. "She was my gift." On April 1st, 2025, 5 years and 3 weeks after Geneva was killed, Kendrine Banks, now 31 years old, appeared in an Oklahoma County courtroom. He did not go to trial. Instead, he accepted a plea deal. The deal worked like this. Banks would plead guilty to murdering Geneva. In exchange, prosecutors would drop the death penalty. He would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never be eligible for release. He would die in prison. But he would not face execution. Oklahoma County District Attorney Vicki Zemp Behenna explained the reasoning behind accepting the plea. She said it was a horrible case for many reasons, but particularly because 3 children were at home at the time their mother was violently murdered. She said it had been a long 5 years for Geneva's kids and her family, and she was relieved there was finally a resolution. The plea deal spared the family from the pain of sitting through a full trial, hearing every detail replayed, and facing the possibility of appeals that could have stretched the case out for years more. As part of the agreement, Banks was barred from contacting the 2 children he shared with Geneva until each of them turns 18. The court drew a line between him and his own kids and put it in writing. Before the judge handed down the sentence, the courtroom opened up for victim impact statements. Geneva's family had waited 5 years for this moment. Her mother, her siblings, her aunts, her uncles, her cousins, and her children all came to court. Despite everything, the grief, the rage, the 5 years of waiting, they showed up. Cassandra Opperman said her stomach was in knots just hearing Jordan's name. One by one, they stood and faced the man who had taken Geneva from them. Through tears, they told him what he had stolen. Geneva's 12-year-old daughter, Alia Vick, spoke. She said her mother was a good person who always kept a smile on her face no matter what happened. And then Geneva's 13-year-old son, DeMontre Webb, took the stand. DeMontre had been about 8 years old on the night of March 10th, 2020. He was one of the 3 children inside the apartment when his mother was killed. He had spent 5 years carrying what he saw and heard that night. Now he was 13, standing in a courtroom, looking at the man who did it, and telling a judge what it was like. The reporters in the courtroom described him as incredibly composed and eloquent. A 13-year-old boy, standing in front of a judge and a killer, holding himself together better than most adults could under the same circumstances. He told the court about the horror that he and his siblings had witnessed. He talked about the moment when he realised he would never be able to talk to his mother again. That specific moment, the instant a child understands that the person they need most in the world is gone and is never coming back. And then he said what his mother meant to him. She meant everything, DeMontre said. Even if she didn't have money for herself, she would do anything for us. Make a way. Make a way. That was who Geneva Opperman was to her children, a woman who would find a path through whatever obstacle was in front of her. Not for herself, but for them. She would make a way. And on March 10th, 2020, Someone took that away from 6 kids who needed it. After the family spoke, the courtroom heard from Kendrine Banks himself. He stood up and addressed the court. He said he was sorry. He said he hated himself. He said he could never forgive himself for what he had done. At moments during his statement, he appeared to tear up. Geneva's family was not moved. Cassandra Opperman told reporters afterward what she did when Banks started crying. She said, "I rolled my eyes. 5 years of waiting, 5 years of grief, 5 years of raising Geneva's children without her. And now the man who beat and stabbed their sister, their daughter, their niece, their mother, was standing in court producing tears and asking for sympathy." Cassandra's 2-word response, "I rolled my eyes," said everything that needed to be said about how much weight his apology carried with the people who actually loved Geneva. The judge sentenced Kendrine Banks to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cassandra said afterward, "I'm so glad he will never walk free. Justice has been served for Geneva, my sister." Brenda Wright added, "It's been 5 long years of agony, and now we have some closure." After the sentencing, Geneva's family spoke publicly about what they wanted people to take away from their sister's death. They were direct about it. They said they wanted Geneva's story to send a message about domestic violence. Cassandra's words were aimed at anyone currently trapped in a relationship like the one her sister was in. She said, "They do not love you. Actions speak louder than words. Please seek help from family and friends. I promise you, they will love to help you rather than bury you. Don't be embarrassed to seek help. You are enough." That last part, "they will love to help you rather than bury you," is the kind of sentence that stays with you because of how bluntly it lays out the 2 possible outcomes: help or a funeral. Those are the options when domestic violence escalates to the point that Geneva's case reached. Her family would rather have helped her leave than stood in a courtroom 5 years later, watching her killer cry fake tears. Geneva Opperman was 26. She had 6 children. Her youngest was 4 months old. 3 of those kids were in the apartment when she was beaten and stabbed to death. One of them, an 8-year-old boy, would grow up to stand in front of a judge at age 13 and describe what he saw, hold himself together, and tell the world that his mother meant everything, that she would make a way. The DA's office confirmed that what happened to Geneva was the result of months of domestic abuse. She was not killed in a single moment of rage. She was killed at the end of a pattern, and the people who lived below her could hear exactly what that pattern sounded like through the floor of their apartment. Running, screaming, and a woman's voice saying, "Stop, okay, please." 6 cases deep into this list, and one detail keeps showing up. The neighbours hear it, the children see it, the family members know something is wrong. The systems are in place, and still, women die inside their own homes, while the people closest to them are left standing in courtrooms years later, trying to find the words. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the next case is different from anything covered so far. In Tamarack, Florida, a man named Nathan Jingles did not just kill his wife, he killed her father and a neighbour too, all while his 4-year-old daughter watched and begged him to stop. His wife Mary had filed 2 domestic violence injunctions and told a court she was afraid he would kill her. She was right, and when the investigation was over, 8 Broward County Sheriff's deputies were fired or suspended for failing to act on her reports. Case number 7. Mary Catherine Jingles was 34 years old. She was a mother. She was an Army veteran who served from 2016 to 2020 and left the military at the rank of captain. Her husband, Nathan Allen Jingles, was also an Army veteran. He served from February 2011 to January 2019, deployed to Afghanistan from July 2013 to January 2014, and also left as a captain. After the military, Nathan worked as an IT contractor with the US Southern Command in Doral, Florida. On paper, this was a family of 2 decorated service members raising a daughter together in a quiet neighborhood in Tamarack, a suburb in Broward County, Florida. Behind the paper, according to court records, police reports, and a 246-page internal affairs investigation by the Broward Sheriff's Office, the reality was very different. Mary Jingles spent the last year of her life telling anyone who would listen that her estranged husband was going to kill her. She told friends, She told family. She told law enforcement. She filed court documents. She called 911. She did everything a person is supposed to do when they believe they are in danger. On February 16, 2025, Nathan Jingles allegedly shot and killed Mary, her father David Ponza, 64, and a neighbour named Andrew Ferrin, 36, while his and Mary's 4-year-old daughter Seraphine witnessed all 3 killings. He has been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of child abuse, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of violating a domestic violence injunction. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. This case has not gone to trial. Nathan Jingles has not been convicted. What follows is based on court records, the arrest warrant, the BSO Internal Affairs report, and verified news reporting. Signs of abuse in the relationship date back to at least 2017, before Nathan and Mary were married. That year, Mary's father, David Ponza, called authorities in Alaska to request a welfare check on his daughter. Mary was there with Nathan, and the two had been arguing. Ponza told the Alaska Department of Public Safety that Nathan had thrown Mary's phone out of a car window because she was recording him. Mary took their daughter and filed for divorce in 2024. According to court records, she described Nathan in her February 2024 divorce filing as heavily armed, with semi-automatic handguns and more sophisticated firearms equipped with silencers. She wrote that she believed he would use those weapons to kill her. On February 9, 2024, Mary requested that BSO deputies come to the family home in Tamarack to enforce a temporary restraining order requiring Nathan to leave. Deputies arrived and confiscated numerous firearms, rifles, suppressors, magazines, ammunition, and a license to carry. According to the Internal Affairs report, the seized arsenal was substantial. The next day, a BSO deputy assisted a Florida Department of Children and Families investigator who was following up on the restraining order. During that visit, Mary told the deputy that Nathan had been abusive a year earlier, that he put her in a chokehold, dragged her upstairs, and said he would kill her if she ever left him. She said Nathan sang songs about killing her. She said he made statements like, "I want to taste the blood of the innocent." She told the deputy she was afraid for her own safety and for their daughters. The deputy documented the abuse. He was later suspended for 10 days for violating BSO's domestic violence policy in how he handled the report. On July 9, 2024, Mary agreed to dismiss the temporary restraining order against Nathan. This was not because the danger had passed. It was part of a negotiation. In exchange for dropping the order, Mary received exclusive possession of the Tamarack home, while the couple worked out a time-sharing agreement for their daughter and finalised the divorce. On August 21, 2024, as a result of the dismissed order, BSO returned Nathan's entire weapons collection to him, every gun, every silencer, every round of ammunition, including, according to court records, the Sig Sauer P320 semi-automatic handgun and silencer that prosecutors believe was used in the February 16th shootings. The very weapons Mary had warned the court about, the ones she said he would use to kill her, were handed back to him. Then things escalated quickly. On October 29, 2024, Mary called BSO's non-emergency line to report that she had found a tracking device on her car. Her divorce attorney had advised her to check the vehicle, and she believed Nathan had placed it there. She asked BSO to collect the tracker as evidence. The on-duty sergeant assigned a community service aide, a front desk worker who handles minor crime reports, to take her complaint. Nobody from BSO ever picked up the tracker. Mary tried to follow up. She attempted to schedule a meeting with the assigned deputy, Raul Ortiz. He did not answer her call. He did not call her back. She sent him an email. He did not respond. On November 26th, Ortiz wrote a report saying he tried to call Mary at a landline number that turned out to be disconnected. He sent the report to his supervisor, Sergeant Devone Williams. Williams rejected the report the next day, saying the tracker should be forensically analysed and that Ortiz should coordinate with another investigator. Nobody ever picked up the tracker. BSO leadership later fired both Williams and another investigator, Detective Brittany King, over their handling of the case. Ortiz was disciplined. On December 27, 2024, Mary called 911 again. This time, she had checked her home security camera and seen that Nathan had entered her house while she was not there. He left carrying less than he came in with. Her father reviewed the footage and confirmed Nathan had left something behind. Mary found it in the garage. It was a backpack. Inside the backpack were plastic wrap, zip-tie handcuffs, rags, gloves, garbage bags, and hand sanitizer. In a court filing she submitted on February 6, 2025, Mary described the backpack's contents and added that she also found a handwritten note. The note said, "Needle, air embolism, psych med OD, waterboarding." She wrote in that filing, "Nathan has entered my home, left a backpack full of items that he would need to murder me. A note with needle, air embolism, psych med OD, waterboarding written on it. Staged a ladder outside my house and left windows in my house ajar. I think a reasonable person would consider those steps to murder me." On December 29th, BSO Deputy Daniel Munoz responded to Mary's home. He interviewed her. He learned about the tracker, the backpack, and the history with Nathan. He wrote a report. Nobody collected the backpack. Munoz was later fired. On December 30th, Mary filed a new petition for a domestic violence injunction at the Broward County Courthouse. In that petition she wrote, "I am fearful for my life, and I think it is imminent that he will attempt to murder me. I think it is likely that without a restraining order, he will attempt this before the lease is up in February." She also wrote, "With Nathan's violent history, his flagrant disregard for rules or laws, and his telling our daughter that he is going to kill me, I am fearful for my life. He has already taken steps to prepare to murder me, but is waiting for the opportune time." A Broward judge granted the temporary protection order. On January 6, 2025, a civil deputy served the new protection order on Nathan at his apartment in Lauderhill, about 2 miles from Mary's home. The order required Nathan to surrender his firearms. He told the deputy he did not have any guns. The deputy's paperwork did not include information about the prior injunction from February 2024, when nearly 20 firearms had been seized. Nobody followed up to verify whether Nathan had actually turned in his weapons. He had not. Florida has a red flag law. It was enacted after the 2018 mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, which also took place in Broward County. Under that law, a law enforcement agency can petition a judge for a risk protection order to temporarily seize firearms from someone deemed a danger to themselves or others. Nathan Jingles met the criteria. He had made violent threats. He had 2 domestic violence restraining orders filed against him. He was accused of substance abuse. Mary had called BSO 14 times in the span of a year about his behaviour. BSO never filed a petition under the red flag law. A Broward Circuit Court spokesperson confirmed that no such order was ever sought. Between February 2024 and February 2025, Mary Jingles contacted BSO 14 times about her estranged husband. She called even the day before she was killed. 14 calls, 2 restraining orders, a backpack full of murder supplies, a note describing methods of killing, and the agency tasked with protecting her never took his guns, never arrested him, and never used the legal tools available to disarm him. February 16th, 2025, a Sunday morning. According to the arrest warrant and the BSO timeline, Nathan Jingles arrived at Mary's home on Plum Bay Parkway in Tamarack at approximately 5:39 a.m. Around 6 a.m, he shot Mary's father, David Ponza, on the back patio of the house. Crime scene photographs later released by the Broward State Attorney's Office show a shattered coffee mug on blood-stained concrete. Ponza had been drinking his morning coffee when he was shot in the head. He was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 64 years old. After shooting Ponza, Nathan allegedly chased Mary through the neighbourhood with a gun. Their 4-year-old daughter Seraphine was with them. Mary ran from house to house trying to find help. She was seen running down the street, according to investigators. At 6:01 a.m, the first 911 call came in. A caller reported hearing gunfire and a woman crying and screaming. Then the caller heard 2 more gunshots. What happened next inside BSO is one of the most damning parts of the entire case. Sergeant Travis Allen directed responding deputies to a rallying point approximately half a mile away from the scene. This violated BSO's active shooter policy, which requires officers to move immediately toward the threat. Between 6:06 and 6:12 a.m, 5 deputies, including Allen, waited at that rally point while additional 911 calls reported more gunshots and screaming from the neighbourhood. Between 6:07 and 6:08 a.m., Mary Jingles found an unlocked door. She ran into the home of Andrew Ferrin, 36. Ferrin had been asleep in his bed. Nathan followed her inside. According to investigators, he shot both Mary and Ferrin to death in the bedroom. Moments after the killings, Sergeant Allen saw a man dressed in all black, walking barefoot down the street with a young child. He broadcast the information over police radio, but did not stop the man. He later told Internal Affairs investigators that the encounter did not register enough for him to act. That man was Nathan Jingles. The child was 4-year-old Seraphine, who had just watched her father kill 3 people. BSO issued an Amber Alert for Seraphine. Hours later, deputies spotted Nathan's silver 2016 BMW X3 in the parking lot of a Walmart on West McNabb Road in North Lauderdale. Bodycam footage released in April 2025 shows deputies converging on the vehicle with weapons drawn. Nathan was arrested. Seraphine was found unharmed physically. Nathan was taken to the BSO Public Safety Building. In the interrogation room, he was photographed, fingerprinted, and had DNA collected. Investigators noted a minor wound on the side of his head. When detectives asked him to tell his side of the story, he requested a lawyer. The interview ended. He sat cuffed and silent for nearly 14 hours before being transferred to the Broward County Jail. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with a firearm, 2 counts of child abuse, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of violating a domestic violence injunction. At his arraignment on March 7, 2025, before Broward County Circuit Court Judge Marina Garcia Wood, his attorney entered a plea of not guilty on all charges. In jail phone calls released by the Broward State Attorney's Office in February 2026, Nathan is heard telling a relative that he is in low-grade torture and referring to the allegations against him as falsehoods. He questioned the Guardian ad litem report in his daughter's custody case. He said, "They just basically accuse me of the crimes, like it's a fact." The Internal Affairs investigation took BSO over 2,000 hours to complete. The final report was 246 pages long. Sheriff Gregory Toney did not sugarcoat what it found. In a press conference in May 2025, Toney described the deputies' work as piss-poor performance and bullshit work. He said Mary Jingles had alerted BSO to the domestic violence she was experiencing, and that the deputies and detectives assigned her cases failed their training and failed to handle her repeated cries for help with the urgency required. In total, 19 BSO employees were fired or disciplined. 8 deputies lost their jobs, including Detective Brittany King, Sergeant Devon Williams, Deputy Daniel Munoz, and the captain who oversaw the Tamarack Division. 11 others received suspensions or other disciplinary action. The failures range from not collecting evidence, to not following up on reports, to not seizing weapons, to not using the red flag law, to not responding to an active shooting in accordance with policy, a particularly sensitive issue in Broward County, given the Parkland massacre 7 years earlier. Sheriff Toney said it directly. "We had multiple opportunities to protect Mary during the months preceding her death, when she alerted us to the domestic violence she was experiencing. Mary Jingles called BSO 14 times. She obtained 2 restraining orders. She found a tracking device on her car. She found a backpack full of zip-tie handcuffs, plastic wrap, and a handwritten note describing methods of murder. She wrote in court filings that she believed her husband was taking steps to kill her and was waiting for the right moment. She told deputies he sang songs about killing her. She said he told their daughter he was going to kill her mother." And in jail calls a year later, the man accused of doing exactly what Mary said he would do told a relative that the allegations were falsehoods. This case has not been tried. Nathan Jingles has pleaded not guilty. The prosecution is seeking the death penalty. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, the next case involves a different kind of planning entirely. In Herndon, Virginia, a former IRS agent named Brendan Banfield did not just kill his wife. He designed an elaborate scheme involving a fake online dating profile, a stranger lured to the house under false pretenses, and the family's own au pair, who helped him plan the whole thing. And their 4-year-old daughter was in the basement when it happened. Case number 8. Christine Banfield was 37 years old. She was a pediatric intensive care nurse. She lived in Herndon, Virginia, a suburb in Fairfax County just outside Washington, D.C. With her husband Brendan Banfield, their 4-year-old daughter, and the family's au pair, a 25-year-old Brazilian woman named Juliana Perez Magalhães. Brendan Banfield was a former law enforcement agent with the Internal Revenue Service. He carried a government-issued firearm. He and Christine had been together for 19 years and married for 12. On the morning of February 24, 2023, police responded to 911 calls from the Banfield home. In an upstairs bedroom, they found Christine with stab wounds to her neck and a man named Joseph Ryan, 39, dead from gunshot wounds nearby. Christine was rushed to the hospital and later pronounced dead. There was no forced entry at the house. Joseph Ryan had no known connection to the Banfield family. The initial story told to police was that Ryan had broken into the home, attacked Christine with a knife, and that Brendan had shot him in self-defense. That story held for 8 months, then it collapsed. And what replaced it was one of the most elaborately planned domestic murders in recent American criminal history. Juliana Perez Magalhães came to the United States from Brazil to work as an au pair, a live-in childcare provider for the Banfield family. She began working for them in approximately October 2021. According to her testimony at trial, the affair between her and Brendan Banfield began roughly 10 months after she started the job, in 2022. It was not a casual fling. They travelled together, including a trip to New York City. Brendan kept a framed photograph of himself and Magalhães on his bedside table in the master bedroom. When police searched the house after the murders, they found it sitting right there on the nightstand. According to Magalhães' testimony, Brendan first expressed a desire to get rid of his wife in October 2022. She said that at first she thought he was joking. He was not. Prosecutor Jenna Sands told the jury during closing arguments that Brendan was in love with Magalhães. He was not just having an affair, he was picking out baby names with her. He wanted a future, but he did not want a divorce. According to the prosecution, he did not want to lose money in a divorce settlement, and he did not want a custody battle over his daughter. He wanted Christine gone in a way that left him free, financially intact, and with full custody. So he built a plan, and according to prosecutors, Magalhães helped him build it. The plan, as laid out by the prosecution and corroborated by Magalhães' testimony, worked like this. Brendan Banfield used Christine's laptop to create a fake profile on FetLife, a BDSM and fetish website. The profile was set up to look like it belonged to Christine. The account portrayed her as someone interested in rough sexual encounters, including a consensual rape fantasy scenario. Both Brendan and Magalhães used the account to message potential targets, according to Magalhães' testimony. They were careful to only post when Christine was home, so that the digital activity would appear to come from her location. Through the fake profile, they connected with Joseph Ryan, a 39-year-old man from Washington, D.C. Ryan believed he was communicating with Christine Banfield. He believed she was inviting him to her home for a consensual sexual encounter. The messages gave him specific instructions. The door would be unlocked. Joseph Ryan had no idea what he was walking into. He had never met any member of the Banfield family. He was a stranger who answered an online message and showed up at an address he was given, expecting a consensual encounter with a woman who did not even know he existed. The purpose of luring Ryan to the house was twofold. First, he would be framed as the person who killed Christine, an intruder who entered the home and attacked her. Second, his killing would be staged as an act of self-defense by Brendan, a trained law enforcement officer who came home and found a stranger attacking his wife. Both murders would be explained in a single story, a home invasion gone wrong. Christine killed by an intruder, the intruder killed by her husband protecting her. That was the plan, and according to prosecutors, Brendan prepared Magalhães for her role in it. He took her to a gun range and taught her how to shoot. February 24, 2023, a Friday morning. According to Magalhães' testimony, the plan was set in motion. Ryan arrived at the Banfield home. The door was unlocked, as the messages had promised. He went upstairs. Their 4-year-old daughter was in the basement of the house during what happened next. Magalhães testified that she and Brendan entered the bedroom together. Ryan was in the room with Christine. According to prosecutors, Brendan called out "police officer," using his law enforcement training to take control of the situation, and then shot Joseph Ryan in the head. Ryan fell. According to the prosecution's case, what happened next was not a panicked reaction. It was the execution of the second half of the plan. Brendan Banfield stabbed his wife. Christine was stabbed 7 times in the neck. The prosecutor told the jury that Christine did not die immediately. She bled out on the floor of the bedroom while her husband manipulated the crime scene around her. According to Magalhães, she saw that Ryan was still moving after being shot in the head. She then shot Ryan in the chest with a gun that Brendan had taught her to use. Ryan died. But before Brendan stabbed Christine, she was still conscious. She was alive and aware of what was happening. And according to Magalhães' testimony, Christine called out to the au pair by name. She yelled, "Juliana, call 911." Christine Banfield, in the final moments of her life, asked the woman who had been sleeping with her husband and who had helped lure a stranger to her home to be murdered. She asked that woman to save her. After both Christine and Ryan were dead, the cover-up began. According to the prosecution, Brendan Banfield smeared Christine's blood onto Joseph Ryan's body. The purpose was to make it look like Ryan had been the one who attacked Christine, that her blood was on him because he had stabbed her. Prosecutors pointed to blood evidence at trial showing that Christine's blood had been deliberately placed on Ryan's right hand, with voids between the fingers, indicating it was smeared rather than transferred naturally during a struggle. Magalhães called 911. According to prosecutors, she ended the first call at Brendan's direction. The first 911 recording, made at 7:47 a.m, was disconnected almost immediately after a dispatcher answered. A dispatcher called the number back and left a message when nobody picked up. Magalhães then called 911 again. This time Brendan took the phone. He told the dispatcher that an unknown male had entered his home and attacked his wife. He said he shot the man. He said there were several marks on Christine's neck. When police arrived, there was no sign of forced entry. They found Christine with fatal stab wounds and Ryan with gunshot wounds. The initial investigation treated the scene as Brendan and Magalhães described it, a home invasion. But Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis was not satisfied. He later said publicly, "I knew, I suspected. I had a feeling that there was a lot more to what met the eye that morning." The investigation took months. Detectives dug into the digital evidence. They examined the FetLife account. They analysed blood spatter patterns and the physical evidence at the crime scene. They looked at the trajectory of the bullets and the placement of the wounds. They examined phone records and internet activity. 8 months after the murders, in October 2023, Magalhães was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and a firearm offence. When police searched the Banfield home in connection with her arrest, they found the framed photograph of Brendan and Magalhães on his nightstand. They also found evidence of the affair and the digital trail connecting the fake FetLife profile to devices in the Banfield household. According to reporting by multiple outlets, investigators arrested Magalhães in part to pressure her into cooperating against Brendan. Defense attorney John Carroll would later tell the jury that the arrest was designed specifically to flip her. It worked. In October 2024, Magalhães pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in Joseph Ryan's death. She agreed to testify against Brendan Banfield. In exchange, prosecutors recommended she receive time served. She would later receive the maximum sentence under her plea agreement, 10 years in prison, handed down on February 13, 2026. In September 2024, a grand jury indicted Brendan Banfield on multiple counts of aggravated murder. He was taken into custody and denied bond. The judge ruled he was a flight risk and a danger to his own daughter. He was charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of using a firearm in the commission of a felony, and 1 count of child endangerment, since his 4-year-old daughter was in the basement of the house when both murders were committed. The trial began on January 13, 2026, in Fairfax County Circuit Court. Judge Penny Askarati presided. The prosecution was led by Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney Jenna Sands. The defence was led by Attorney John Carroll. The trial lasted approximately 3 weeks. 34 witnesses testified, but the case came down to 2 people, Juliana Perez Magalhães and Brendan Banfield himself. Magalhães testified for 2 days. She walked the jury through the affair, Brendan's desire to get rid of his wife, the creation of the fake FetLife profile, the luring of Joseph Ryan, and the events of February 24, 2023. She described watching Brendan shoot Ryan in the head. She described seeing Brendan stab Christine. She admitted she herself shot Ryan when she saw he was still moving. Then Brendan Banfield made the rare decision to take the stand in his own defence. He testified that he loved his wife. He admitted to the affair with Magalhães, but called the murder allegations absolutely crazy and absurd. He said the affair was just that, an affair, and nothing more. His version of events was completely different, He testified that on the morning of February 24th, he had left the house to get food from McDonald's. While he was gone, Magalesh called him and told him there was a stranger in the home. He said he rushed back, went upstairs with his gun drawn, and found Christine naked with Ryan. He testified that Christine called out to him, warning him that Ryan had a knife. He said Ryan told him to drop the gun and said Christine gave herself to me. Brendan testified that he fired when it appeared Ryan made a stabbing motion toward Christine. The prosecution dismantled this account. Sands pointed to the blood evidence, Christine's blood smeared on Ryan's hand, in a pattern that indicated deliberate staging rather than a natural struggle. She pointed to the digital evidence. She pointed to the fact that Christine Banfield had no history of using dating websites or fetish platforms, while Brendan was, by his own admission on the stand, a serial cheater. She pointed to the fact that Brendan had been picking out baby names with Magalesh. Sands told the jury, he was in love with Juliana. He was afraid of losing her. He needed to get rid of his wife so that they could be together, so that they could marry, so that they could have those babies that he was picking out names for. Defense attorney Carroll argued that Magalhais's testimony was bought and paid for by the prosecution. He pointed out that her plea deal only benefited her if she implicated Brendan. He argued the digital forensics actually showed Christine was in control of her own devices and that the investigation was flawed from the beginning. On February 2nd, 2026, after deliberating for approximately 9 hours over 2 days, the jury returned its verdict. Brendan Banfield was found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder, 1 for Christine Banfield and 1 for Joseph Ryan. He was also found guilty of using a firearm in the commission of a felony and child endangerment. Under Virginia law, the aggravated murder convictions carry a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney Steve Descano spoke after the verdict. He said, "It's monstrous. I mean, that's really what it is. It's monstrous. I've been doing this job for a while, and I can tell you that this defendant stood out to me highest above all the other murder cases that we've done in my 6 years here." Prosecutor Sands addressed the motive directly. She said, "It's really challenging to try to put yourself in someone like Mr. Banfield's mind. And I don't know that I want to try that hard, to be completely honest. I think that he was obviously hoping for a life with Juliana, and he didn't see a way to accomplish that without executing his wife." Sentencing is scheduled for May 8th, 2026. Joseph Ryan's mother gave a victim impact statement at Magalians's sentencing. She said simply, "I lost so very much." The judge told Magalians at her sentencing, "You do not deserve anything other than incarceration and a life of reflection. May it weigh heavily on your soul." Joseph Ryan was 39 years old. He had no connection to the Banfield family. He answered a message online and walked into a house where 2 people were waiting to kill him and use his body to cover up a murder. Christine Banfield was 37. She was a paediatric ICU nurse who spent her career keeping other people's children alive. Her own daughter was in the basement of the house, while her husband stabbed her 7 times in the neck. 8 cases into this list, and this one breaks the pattern in a way none of the others do. Every other case involves rage, jealousy, a loss of control, or a final explosion of violence that had been building for months or years. This one was engineered, drafted like a blueprint, a fake profile, a stranger catfished off the internet, a gun range trip to train the accomplice, a staged crime scene with blood smeared on a dead man's hands, and a 4-year-old girl in the basement while it all happened above her head. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the next case brings things back to something rawer and more immediate. In Sellersburg, Indiana, a man named Mac Lewis shot his wife Elizabeth when she asked him for a divorce, fired at her 11-year-old daughter, and left the child standing over her mother's body with blood on her hands, calling 911 with the words, "My stepdad just killed my mum. She's dead." Case number 9. Elizabeth Lizzie Bennett Lewis was 32 years old. She was a nurse. She was a mother of 2 daughters, McKenna, who was about 13 at the time, and Tinsley, who was 11. Elizabeth had McKenna when she was just 18, which meant the 2 of them grew up almost like best friends. McKenna would later say in court that she considered her mother her closest person in the world. Elizabeth was the daughter of Tony Bennett, a well-known figure in Indiana education. Bennett served as Indiana's state superintendent of public instruction from 2008 to 2012 and later held the position of Florida Commissioner of Education. He was a public figure. The family was prominent. None of that mattered on the night of April 1, 2022, when Elizabeth's husband, Mac Lewis, loaded a gun in his truck, walked into their home on Forest Hill Circle in Sellersburg, Indiana, and shot her to death, while her 11-year-old daughter and the girl's 10-year-old friend were inside the house. The family's attorney, Larry Wilder, released a statement after the killing that said, "Lizzie gave her short life to caring and helping others. Her choice of becoming a nurse was just an extension of her desire to make the world a better place for everyone." She was 32 and she was dead, and her daughter Tinsley was standing over her body with blood on her hands. On the evening of April 1, 2022, Elizabeth told Mac Lewis she wanted a divorce. Both the prosecution and the defense agreed on this point at trial. That conversation happened. What they disagreed on was everything that followed. According to Clark County Prosecutor Jeremy Mull, who tried the case alongside Deputy Prosecutor Krista Willick, Lewis went out to his truck after Elizabeth told him she wanted the divorce. In the truck, he loaded a gun. Then he came back inside the house with the loaded weapon. Their home was in the 11,000 block of Forest Hill Circle, a subdivision in Sellersburg, a small town in Clark County, southern Indiana, just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. Inside that house were Elizabeth, her 11-year-old daughter Tinsley, and Tinsley's 10-year-old friend who was over for the evening. 2 children, a mother, and a man who had just been told his marriage was over, carrying a loaded gun back through the front door. What the prosecution told the jury at trial was direct and specific. Prosecutor Mull described it during opening statements. Elizabeth was in the closet. Mac Lewis raised the gun and shot her over and over and over and killed her. The medical examiner, Dr. James Jacoby, performed the autopsy. He testified that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the right side of Elizabeth's face, below the eye. She also had other flesh wounds and grazing from additional bullets. Lewis shot his wife 4 times, but the shooting did not stop with Elizabeth. After killing her, Lewis aimed the gun at Tinsley and fired. The bullet struck in the area where the 11-year-old had been standing. She was not hit. The shot missed. But it was close enough that the jury later convicted Lewis of attempted murder for firing at the child. Lewis then continued firing the gun inside the house. Multiple additional shots were discharged. Investigators later found bullet holes throughout the home. One of the rounds went through a television, exited the house entirely, crossed the road, and lodged in a home in a neighbouring subdivision. During the shooting, Elizabeth had yelled something to her daughter. She called out to Tinsley and told her to call 911. Those were instructions from a dying mother to her 11-year-old child. "Call for help. Get someone here." Tinsley heard the shots. She ran out and saw Lewis coming out of the area where her mother had been. Prosecutor Mull described at trial what happened next. He said Tinsley saw Lewis and that she described him as being very angry, with his eyes very red. And in what Mull called her little girl scream, she cried out, "You shot my mum." Then she told him to get out. "Get out of my house! Leave!" An 11-year-old girl screaming at the man who had just killed her mother and fired a gun in her direction, telling him to leave her home. Lewis left. He got in his vehicle and drove away from Forest Hill Circle. He did not call an ambulance. He did not call police. He left his wife dead on the floor, 2 terrified children in the house, and drove off. Tinsley called 911. The recording of that call was played for the jury at trial. The courtroom heard the voice of an 11-year-old girl telling a Clark County emergency dispatcher what had happened. "My stepdad just killed my mum," she said. "She's dead." She said those words, "she's dead," more than once to the dispatcher. The operator stayed on the phone with Tinsley until officers arrived. In the background of the 911 recording, gunshots could still be heard. Lewis had been firing the weapon while Tinsley was already trying to get help. The Clark County Sheriff's Office responded to the home. What the first officers found when they arrived was described in detail during the second day of trial. Tinsley was in the house. She was shaking. She was inconsolable. Her hands were covered in her mother's blood. She could not stop looking at her hands. Emergency medical personnel had to be called over specifically to try to wash the blood off the girl's hands so that she could calm down enough to function. An 11-year-old child, standing in her own home, unable to stop staring at the blood of her mother on her skin, shaking so badly that paramedics had to intervene just to clean her hands. Elizabeth was found dead inside the home with multiple gunshot wounds. Officers confirmed the scene and began documenting the evidence. They found bullet holes throughout the house. The pattern of damage was consistent with someone firing a weapon multiple times in different directions inside a residential home where children were present. Meanwhile, Sellersburg police located Mac Lewis driving on State Road 60, not far from the subdivision. He was taken into custody without incident. He was charged with murder, attempted murder, and criminal recklessness with a firearm. At his first court appearance on April 4, 2022, Prosecutor Mull argued Lewis should be held without bond. The judge agreed. Lewis was held at the Clark County Jail. He entered a plea of not guilty. The trial of Mac Lewis began in late September 2023, 18 months after the shooting. It took place in Clark Circuit Court 1 before Judge Nick Carafa. The prosecution was led by Jeremy Mull and Krista Willick. Lewis was represented by defense attorneys Mitch Harlan and Case McCann. The trial had to be paused on certain days so that Lewis could receive medical treatment for kidney failure. Even the logistics of holding the man accountable were complicated by his health. The two sides agreed on the basic facts. Lewis had a gun. Elizabeth was shot and killed. But the core question for the jury was whether Lewis intentionally murdered his wife or whether the shooting was an accident. The defense's version of events was this. Lewis did not go to the truck to load a gun to kill Elizabeth. He went to the truck to load a gun to kill himself. Defense attorney Mitch Harlan argued that Lewis was holding the weapon to his own head, threatening suicide, after Elizabeth told him she wanted a divorce. Harlan told the jury that Lewis knew Elizabeth's brother had died by suicide and that Lewis was using that knowledge, using her family's history of loss, to pressure her into dropping the divorce by threatening to do the same thing in front of her. According to the defense, Elizabeth tried to wrestle the gun away from Lewis to stop him from shooting himself. During the struggle, the gun went off and the bullets hit Elizabeth. Harlan argued that what followed, Lewis firing additional rounds inside the house, was done in anger and shock, not as a deliberate attack. The prosecution called that story exactly what it was. They called it an insult. Mull told the jury that Lewis tried to make this trial about Elizabeth causing her own death by wrestling over the gun. He asked the jury to firmly and soundly reject that idea, and they did. On October 3, 2023, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on all counts. Murder. Attempted murder for shooting at Tinsley. 3 counts of criminal recklessness committed with a deadly weapon for firing the gun multiple times inside the home where children were present. The jury also found aggravating circumstances for a firearm enhancement, which added additional years to the sentence. Lewis's defense attorney, Mitch Harlan, said afterward that they were disappointed and had hoped for a conviction on reckless homicide instead of murder. He said Lewis planned to appeal. Tony Bennett stood outside the courtroom after the verdict, surrounded by family. He said, "After 18 months of absolute hell, today is the first day of justice for our beautiful daughter, their mum, our 2 grandchildren, and their friend who endured this tragedy. No children, no child, should ever have their mum stripped away from them in the manner Lizzie was stripped away from her kids. And even more, no child should have that happen before their eyes." Then he said something else that cut through everything. He said he had watched the statement Lewis gave to police on the night of April 1st, 2022. He said that of all the lies and twisted statements Lewis made that night, he got one thing right. It should have been him. Sentencing took place on November 2nd, 2023, before Judge Nick Carafa. The courtroom was full. The Bennett family filled the seats. Before the sentence was handed down, the court heard victim impact statements. Tinsley went first. She was 13 years old now. 2 years had passed since the night she called 911 with her mother's blood on her hands. She stood up in the courtroom and read from a piece of paper. She started by referencing violence happening across the globe. She said she lies awake at night, wondering who could do terrible things to people. She said the night in 2022 was not a war zone, but it felt that way to me. Then she made her request to the judge. She said, "Please consider that he took my mum. My mum was our world. I'll never be the same. He should be punished for what he did to my mum. Please send him far away as you can. Never let him out of prison." She was 13 years old, and she asked a judge to send her stepfather as far away as possible and never let him out. And she said it clearly and calmly, in a courtroom full of adults after spending 2 years carrying what she saw that night. McKenna spoke next. She was 15. She talked about the relationship she had with her mother, how Elizabeth having her at 18 meant they were more like best friends than mother and daughter. She talked about the missed moments, the memories that would never be made, the things her mother would never see, graduations, weddings, grandchildren. Then she looked directly at Mac Lewis and said, "I hope the rest of your life is as miserable as you have made ours." Lewis's own aunt, Patricia Belvey, also spoke. She was already crying before she started. She said she loved Lizzie and would miss her beautiful, bright smile. She said she did not condone what Mac did. She said she was heartbroken, but she said she still supported Mac because that is what real love and family do. You love unconditionally. It was an honest statement from someone caught between grief for the victim and loyalty to the person who killed her. Mac Lewis spoke last. Although he did not take the stand during the trial itself, he addressed the court at sentencing. It was the first time the courtroom heard him speak about what happened. He apologised to Tinsley and McKenna. His voice broke. He said, "I really didn't mean for my actions." Then he said something he had apparently been saying since the night of the shooting. He said, "Everyone thinks I'm a monster, but I'm not. It was an accident. An accident." 4 gunshot wounds to his wife, including one below the eye that killed her. A shot fired directly at an 11-year-old child. Multiple rounds discharged throughout the house while 2 girls were inside. A bullet that travelled through a television, out of the house, across a road, and into a neighbour's home. And the man who did it stood up in court 18 months later and called it an accident. Judge Nick Carafa sentenced Mac Lewis to 100 years in prison. The breakdown was 55 years for the murder conviction, 30 years for the attempted murder of Tinsley, and additional time for the criminal recklessness charges and the firearm enhancement. It was exactly what Prosecutor Mull had requested. Tony Bennett spoke to reporters after the sentencing. He was measured. He acknowledged that there were no winners. He pointed out that even Lewis's aunt had spoken from the heart, and that he understood she needed to support her family, just as the Bennetts needed to support theirs. Then he said, "Let me just say this. There's not a whole hell of a lot of happiness today here in our hearts, because there's one person not standing here with us, and they'll never have her back. And we'll never have her back. And that's the most unfair thing about this." Elizabeth Lizzie Bennett Lewis was 32 years old. She was a nurse. She had 2 daughters. She asked for a divorce and was shot to death in her own closet. Her 11-year-old daughter saw what happened, screamed at the killer to leave, then called 911 and said 6 words that would be played in a courtroom 18 months later. "My stepdad just killed my mum." Tinsley asked the judge to send Lewis far away and never let him out. The judge gave him 100 years. She was 13 when she asked. Lewis was 48 when he was sentenced. He will not live long enough to see the outside of a prison. That is what Tinsley requested, and that is what she got. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. 9 cases, 9 women, bulletproof vests, phone recordings, safe houses, restraining orders, 911 calls from children. And now the final case on this list goes somewhere none of the others have gone. Because in Queens, New York, a man named Stephen Giraldo did not use a gun or a knife. He used a car. He told his 3 sons to keep their seatbelts on, drove his SUV directly into their mother on a sidewalk, and when the vehicle flipped over, he climbed across one of his own children, crawled out the window, and stabbed his wife in the chest while she lay trapped on the ground. Case number 10. Sophia Giraldo was 41 years old. She was a mother of 3 boys, ages 6, 9, and 11. She lived in Flushing, a neighbourhood in Queens, New York. She had filed for divorce from her husband, Stephen Giraldo. The couple was no longer living together. She was building a new life. She had started a podcast called the Unfiltered and Free Podcast, which she described as real conversations about living life after betrayal and abuse. In the first episode, she talked openly about her own marriage and called it abusive. Sophia had also appeared on another podcast called the Redefining Wealth Podcast, where she shared more about her story. She said she and Stephen got married on October 3rd, 2009, and that just 4 days later, she was already in tears because she knew something was not right. The relationship had been volatile from the beginning. By December 2022, Sophia was out. She had the divorce filing. She had her own place. She was speaking publicly about what she had survived. She was doing the work that advocates tell abuse victims to do. Leave, rebuild, speak your truth, help others going through the same thing. On December 27th, 2022, 2 days after Christmas, her estranged husband drove an SUV into her body while their 3 sons watched from inside the vehicle. Then he climbed out of the wrecked car, crawled over one of his own children, and stabbed her in the chest. Sophia Giraldo did not die, but she has not been conscious since that morning. This is what happened, according to the criminal complaint filed by the Queen's District Attorney's Office, security video footage, and statements made by the couple's 11-year-old son to investigators. On December 27, 2022, at approximately 5:20 a.m, Stephen Giraldo, 36, was in a white Ford Explorer sport utility vehicle outside Sophia's residence near Parsons Boulevard and Sanford Avenue in Flushing. He was there to drop off the couple's 3 sons after having them for a visit. The boys were in the car with him. The 11-year-old was in the front passenger seat. The 9-year-old and 6-year-old were in the back. Security camera footage captured what happened next. The video shows Giraldo getting out of the Ford Explorer to move a trash bag that was blocking the vehicle. He moved the bag, then got back into the driver's seat. At the same time, Sophia walked out of her residence and stepped in front of the car to receive her children. According to the 11-year-old son, who later told authorities what he witnessed, his father made a comment. He told the children to keep their seatbelts on. "Keep your seatbelt on." Then Stephen Giraldo hit the accelerator. He drove the Ford Explorer directly into Sophia. The SUV slammed into her with enough force that the vehicle flipped and turned onto its side. The impact was violent enough to cause broken bones in Sophia's leg and catastrophic neurological damage. 3 children were strapped into their seats inside a car that had just been used as a weapon against their mother. The security camera footage shows the moment of impact and the vehicle going over. What the camera did not fully capture was what Giraldo did next, but the criminal complaint and his own guilty plea fill in the rest. After the car came to rest on its side, Stephen Giraldo moved. He did not check on his children. He did not try to call for help. He did not sit in the wreckage and wait. Instead, he climbed over his son, the child who was seated in the front passenger seat, and pushed himself out through the vehicle's window. He had a knife. He went to where Sophia was lying on the ground, already injured from being struck by a 2-ton vehicle, and he stabbed her in the chest. Police later found a bloodied knife near her body. Emergency responders arrived and found Sophia in critical condition. She was transported to New York Presbyterian Hospital in Queens. The injuries she sustained were staggering. The collision caused severe neurological damage, brain damage, and broken bones in her leg. The stab wound from the knife punctured her liver. Sophia survived, but she never woke up. As of the sentencing hearing in October 2023, 9 months after the attack, Sophia Giraldo had not regained consciousness. She was described by her family and the DA's office as being in a vegetative state, under care at a rehabilitation facility. She has remained unconscious since December 27, 2022. Her 3 sons were physically unharmed. They were still strapped into their seats inside the overturned SUV when first responders arrived. But what they had just witnessed, their father telling them to buckle up, the car slamming into their mother, the vehicle flipping, their father climbing over one of them to get out and attack their mother with a knife, that was not something seatbelts could protect them from. Stephen Giraldo was arrested at the scene. He was arraigned on December 28, 2022, before Judge Scott Dunn. The charges included attempted murder in the 2nd degree, assault in the 1st and 2nd degree, reckless endangerment in the 2nd degree, endangering the welfare of a child, and criminal possession of a weapon in the 4th degree. Judge Dunn remanded him, meaning he was held without bail. Queen's District Attorney Melinda Katz issued a statement on the day of the arraignment. She said, "The brutality of the attack and the fact that it was committed in full view of the victim's 3 young children stirs heartbreak and outrage in all of us." The case moved through the court system over the following months. On September 5, 2023, Stephen Giraldo, now 36, stood before Queen's Supreme Court Justice Michael Yavinsky and pleaded guilty to attempted murder. The plea agreement called for a sentence of 25 years in prison. The guilty plea meant there would be no trial. Giraldo admitted to what he had done. He admitted he deliberately drove the SUV into his wife. He admitted to the stabbing. The security footage, the testimony of his own 11-year-old son, and the physical evidence at the scene left no room for any other version of events. Sentencing was scheduled for October 6, 2023. The sentencing hearing took place at Queen's Supreme Court. Justice Yavinsky presided. The courtroom heard from Sophia's family, her friends, and from Stephen Giraldo himself. Sophia's father, Pastor Chuck Brooks, addressed Giraldo directly. He did not hold back. He told Giraldo, "In front of your own sons, you viciously attempted to take the life of their mother. You attempted to murder me and my wife's daughter." He described his grandchildren as emotionally damaged. He said they were traumatized not only by the loss of their mother's daily presence — she had been unconscious for 9 months and could not speak to them, hold them, or care for them — but by what they had seen. They watched their father use a car as a weapon against the woman who raised them. They were in the car when it happened. One of them had his father climb over his body to get out and finish the job with a knife. Pastor Brooks then said something about the sentence that captured what every family member in every one of these cases eventually confronts: the gap between punishment and pain. He said, 25 years, or a lifetime in prison, or even execution, won't satisfy my personal desire for vengeance for what you did to my daughter. Sophia's best friend also spoke. She addressed Giraldo and said, "There isn't much that I want to say to you that doesn't come straight from the pits of hell." Then Stephen Giraldo spoke. He started by addressing Sophia directly. He said, "Please forgive me for this unspeakable, unfathomable, unimaginable hurt I have inflicted upon you. You've always meant the world to me, and the last thing I ever wanted to do was hurt you in any way, shape, or form. I will always love you. You will always have a special place in my heart." He said he was sorry. He begged for forgiveness. His attorney claimed he had been dealing with mental health issues at the time of the attack. And then, in the same statement where he asked for forgiveness, Giraldo said something that revealed exactly who he was. He said, "Sophia, I forgive you for not respecting me as your pre-designated husband. I forgive you for not honouring me as a good and loving father." He forgave her. The man who drove an SUV into his wife's body and then stabbed her while she lay on the ground, while their children sat trapped in the wreckage, stood in a courtroom and told the woman he put in a coma that he forgave her for not respecting him, for not honouring him. That statement was not an apology. It was a man who still believed, even after pleading guilty to attempted murder, that his wife had done something wrong by leaving him, that she owed him something, that the divorce, the separation, the podcast where she talked about surviving abuse, that all of it was a failure on her part to give him what he was entitled to. DA Melinda Katz responded publicly. She said, "This is one of the most brutal cases we have prosecuted. To tell your children to buckle up, purposefully hit their mother, and then climb over your son to continue your attack with a knife is unconscionable." Justice Yavinsky sentenced Stephen Giraldo to 25 years in prison, with 5 years of post-release supervision. A protective order was issued that forbids Giraldo from having any contact with his 3 sons. The order extends beyond his prison sentence. The details of what Sophia had been living with before the attack paint a picture that anyone who works in domestic violence would recognise immediately. She filed for divorce. She left the home. She was speaking publicly about abuse. She was building something new, and her husband could not tolerate any of it. The timeline tells the story. Sophia described the marriage as abusive from the very beginning. 4 days in, she knew something was wrong. She endured years of it. She eventually found the strength to leave. She filed for divorce. She started a podcast to help other women in the same situation. She was doing everything right. And at 5:20 in the morning, 2 days after Christmas, while her 3 sons were sitting in his car, her estranged husband drove that car into her body at full speed and then crawled through a window with a knife to make sure the job was finished. The 11-year-old in the front seat, the one his father climbed over to get out of the overturned vehicle, had to watch all of it. He had to watch his father tell him to keep his seatbelt on, knowing now what that instruction actually meant. He had to feel the impact. He had to feel the car flip. He had to feel his father's body moving across him to get out. And then he had to know, at 11 years old, that his father went outside and stabbed his mother. That boy told investigators what happened. His account matched the security footage. An 11-year-old child provided testimony against his own father in an attempted murder case because he was the closest witness to the crime. Sofia Giraldo is alive. That makes this case different from every other case on this list. She was not killed, but she has been unconscious since December 27, 2022. She has severe brain damage. She is in a rehabilitation facility. Her 3 sons are growing up without her, even though she is technically still here. They cannot talk to her. They cannot hear her voice. They cannot feel her hug them. Their mother exists in a bed in a facility somewhere, breathing but not present, because their father decided that if he could not have her, he would take her away from everyone. Katz said it at sentencing. The children will have to live through it, and they will grow up knowing that that happened their entire life. 3 boys, ages 6, 9, and 11 at the time of the attack. They are now roughly 8, 11, and 13. They have a mother who is alive but cannot be their mother. They have a father who is in prison for trying to kill her. They have a protective order that says the man who raised them cannot contact them. Everything they had as a family was destroyed in a matter of seconds on a dark morning in Queens by a man who told them to put their seatbelts on before he did it. Steven Giraldo will be in prison until approximately 2047. He will be in his early 60s when he is released, assuming he serves the full sentence. His 3 sons will be adults by then. They will have grown up entirely without either parent. Sofia may still be in a vegetative state. She may have passed. Nobody knows. What is certain is that she was not able to watch her sons grow up, and that is because of a decision Steven Giraldo made at 5:20 a.m. on a December morning while 3 children sat buckled into the back seat of his car. 10 cases, 10 men, 10 women who were wives and mothers, children who watched, who called 911, who testified, who begged their fathers to stop, who had blood on their hands, who were shot at, who were climbed over, who were told to buckle up. Kiera Hudson wore a bulletproof vest and was shot in the head. Yahira Gordon was recording on her phone and was shot in the temple. Kulsuma Akhtar was in a safe house and was stabbed on a public street. Valerie Junius was chased through a neighbourhood and killed while her son held her arm. Mustwell Alaza made it to the stairwell and her 14-year-old tried to pull his father off her. Geneva Opperman's neighbours heard her screaming through the floor. Mary Jingles called the police 14 times and her 4-year-old watched everything. Christine Banfield was killed in a plot designed by her own husband and the woman living under her roof. Elizabeth Lewis was shot in her closet and her 11-year-old called 911 with blood on her hands. And Sofia Giraldo was run over and stabbed while her sons sat strapped into seatbelts. Their father told them to keep on. Not one of these women was caught off guard by a stranger. Every single one of them was hurt by the person who was supposed to protect them. And in every case, children were there, watching, listening, remembering. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.